Hello there, and welcome. Tonight, we lean into a question that drifts like mist between the branches of time, a question not of proof or certainty, but of gentle wondering. What if humans had not arrived after the fall of the dinosaurs, but instead had risen during their reign? What if fragile hands, thoughtful eyes, and restless minds had awakened beneath the long shadows of titanic life? Wherever you are, whether in daylight or in the hush of night, I hope you are comfortable. Perhaps lying down, perhaps already halfway, toward sleep. We move slowly together now into an imagining, not hurried, not forced, just drifting, just listening. If you find yourself closing your eyes, that is welcome. If you stay awake, that is welcome too. This is not a path of answers. It is simply a question as old as silence itself. The earth turns, as it always has, but tonight it turns in an older time, in a world where the air is warmer, thicker, where forests tower, and where the ground trembles beneath the weight of living giants. This is the Mesozoic, the age of dinosaurs. 100 million years before the familiar shape of our history, the continents still drifting, the seas wider, the sky filled with wings broader than sailboats. It is into this living landscape of vastness that we set our imagination. The first whisper of the question arrives. If humans had awakened here, what would they be? How would thought bloom under the constant gaze of creatures so immense, so ancient, that survival itself seems fragile? The question hovers like smoke, dissolving slowly into the air. A grounding detail. Paleontologists remind us that during the late Cretaceous, the Earth was warmer than now, with no polar ice caps, sea levels much higher, and vast inland seas carving through the continents. Ferns and cycads flourish, flowering plants only beginning to appear. Insects buzz in heavy air. Reptiles dominate the food chain. Against this backdrop, imagine the delicate rise of human form. Soft skin, upright posture, eyes reflecting firelight. How small it seems, how unlikely, and yet, perhaps, not impossible. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. A small group of humans gathered beneath giant cycads, their roots tangled with moss. Above them, the ground shakes with the passing of a sauropod, a living mountain of flesh. The humans stand utterly still, gazing upward as if the creature is a god moving through the world. In such a moment, how does awareness shape itself? Does awe arise sooner, more deeply? Do they begin to dream of beings larger than imagination? A poetic image. The sky itself becomes a canvas, filled with wings. Pterosaurs drift like shadows over rivers, their cries echoing like thunder. A fragile human hand reaches upward, tracing the line of their flight. The gesture is quiet, instinctive. In that reaching, something more than survival glimmers. It is the first motion of wonder. And yet, a question lingers. Could fragile bodies endure long enough to nurture thought in a world of such relentless predators? Tyrannosaurs prowl. Crocodilians wait in the water. Raptors move with eerie intelligence through ferns. Every day, survival demands vigilance. Could intelligence evolve as a refuge from fear? Could the mind itself become the ultimate defense, sharper than claw, more enduring than scale? The invitation is gentle. Imagine yourself there. The air, heavy, scented with resin and damp earth. The sounds of creatures you cannot name, filling the forest around you. You stand barefoot on warm soil, the horizon broken not by cities, but by the swaying silhouettes of towering dinosaurs. Somewhere nearby, your kin gather wood, shape stone, perhaps fashion bone into tools. But always in the periphery, always in the edges of awareness, the thunder of giants presses against thought. This is the cradle of your civilization. The river carries reflections of stars. The same constellations you know now, though dimmed by haze, still scattered across the night. Would they seem more distant, more unreachable in such a dangerous world? Or would their permanence be a comfort, the one unchanging presence above a restless earth? And perhaps here, in this strange imagining, humanity's first words form not in quiet safety, but in constant alarm. Perhaps language is born in warning calls, in whispered signals passed quickly through shadows. From these seeds, eventually, poetry might still rise. From fear, perhaps, beauty. It is only the beginning of the imagining, only the first breath of a long drift. But already the question deepens. Already it opens space within the mind. What if humans had evolved in the age of dinosaurs? Not later, not after, but with them, beside them, always small in the shadow of giants. The night unfolds slowly. The earth continues to turn, and we move further, section by section, into the dream. The skies open above the ancient earth, vast and humid, filled with wings unlike any we have ever known. Pterosaurs, some light as sparrows, others spanning more than 10 meters from tip to tip, glide on warm updrafts that rise from inland seas and volcanic plains. Their shapes cast shadows across rivers and fern forests, shadows that move like drifting sails. These are the skies of giants, a grounding detail. Fossil records tell us that pterosaurs were not dinosaurs, though they lived beside them. They were the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight, long before birds as we know them. Some, like Quetzalcoatlus, towered over giraffes when standing on the ground. In this world, the sky is not empty but alive, restless with wings. And here, we imagine humans. What is it to look upward and see not emptiness but a ceiling of creatures, predators and scavengers, passing silently overhead? Does awe deepen into fear? Does every glance upward carry both wonder and unease? A poetic image emerges. A group of humans huddled at dusk, fire flickering weakly in the damp air, while above them silhouettes sweep across a blood-orange sky. The sound of wings is a deep, leathery beating, like drums on the horizon. Each shadow momentarily blots out the fading sun. The humans watch, still and silent, as if the heavens themselves are alive. Speculation rises like mist. Could humanity ever claim the sky in such an age? Could curiosity have driven them to mimic wings, to dream of flight not as myth, but as necessity? Or would the dominance of pterosaurs have kept human gaze lowered, bound to earth, never daring to rise? The invitation is gentle. Picture yourself standing in a clearing of cycads. You tilt your head back. The sky above is heavy with cloud, but in the breaks you glimpse vast figures gliding, their wings slow and deliberate. You hear their cries echo over the marshland, piercing, unearthly. Your skin prickles. You are small, impossibly small. Yet even in this smallness, you feel the stirring of imagination. You wonder, if they can soar, why not us? In such a world, perhaps the human relationship with sky is different. Today we look upward for freedom, for transcendence. But then, in the Mesozoic, perhaps the sky is not an invitation, but a threat. Perhaps the heavens are something to be endured, not embraced. And still the stars wait above the wings. The constellations are there, unchanged, though veiled by the movements of pterosaurs. The question lingers softly. Does the human spirit find its way to wonder even when the sky itself seems already owned? The giants pass overhead. The air grows, still again. And we move forward, deeper into the imagining, step by slow step, like dreamers walking through time. The sun lingers heavy in the Mesozoic sky. Its warmth presses down on land and sea alike, turning forests into steaming chambers of life. This is not the Earth as we know it. No polar caps cool the edges of the world, no ice sheets balance the climate. Instead, the air holds more carbon, more water vapor, more breath. The atmosphere itself feels alive, thick, humid, sometimes suffocating. A grounding detail. Scientists tell us that during much of the Cretaceous, average global temperatures were higher than today by 6 to 10 degrees. Sea levels rose hundreds of feet above modern coasts, drowning vast regions beneath shallow seas. Crocodilians basked in what are now polar latitudes. Oxygen levels, too, were often higher, fueling the immense size of insects and reptiles. This is the world into which we imagine fragile humanity stepping. How would human physiology shift under such skies? Would lungs expand wider, rib cages broader, hearts stronger to carry oxygen through blood more quickly? Would skin darken under the unrelenting blaze of sun, or grow more resistant to the constant dampness of swamp and storm? Would humans be taller, more muscular, less fragile than the beings we are today? A poetic image, a small cluster of humans, moving through a humid valley, their breath visible in the thick air. They pause by a pool where dragonflies as wide as their hands skim the surface. A sauropod moves slowly in the distance, its skin shimmering with heat. The air feels close, almost pressing as though the world itself is breathing upon them. And yet, there is the question. In such conditions, could intelligence even find room to grow? Or would survival absorb every spark of thought? In our time, the mind expands when shelter and food allow rest, when safety offers time for reflection. But here, in a harsher balance, would the mind still find space for dreaming? Or would thought remain forever tied to muscle, to movement, to vigilance? The invitation is soft. Imagine yourself walking barefoot on ancient soil. The ground is warm, damp, alive with ferns and moss. Every breath feels deeper, fuller, filling your chest in ways unfamiliar. The sun is heavy, the sky tinted with haze, and each step feels as though taken in a dream. Do you feel stronger? Or do you feel weighed down by the atmosphere itself, as though the Earth's embrace is almost too much? The Mesozoic sun does not hurry. It sinks slowly, casting long shadows of cycads and conifers. The humans watch, still small beneath trees, and titans. And above them, always above, the thick air glows with the last light of day. The question lingers gently, like a leaf floating on water. In a world so different, would humans remain who we are? Or would the very shape of our being bend to the demands of heat, humidity, and time? The earth turns again, as it always does, and in its turning, the journey continues, deeper into the forest of giants. The forest stretches in every direction, a cathedral of green older than memory. Towering conifers rise like living pillars, their bark thick and ancient, their crowns vanishing into haze. Cycads cluster at their feet, their fronds wide and waxy, spiraling upward like sculpted stone. Beneath them, ferns spread in carpets, softening the forest floor. This is the architecture of the Mesozoic, a world where trees are titans and the air hums with the damp breath of plants. A grounding detail. Fossil records show that flowering plants, the angiosperms that now dominate our landscapes, were only just beginning to appear during the Cretaceous. Instead, cycads, ginkgos, and towering conifers ruled the land, shaping ecosystems that felt both alien and familiar. For tens of millions of years, these giants defined the canopy under which dinosaurs thrived. Now we place humans here, within, this cathedral of plants. Imagine their size, small, almost ghost-like, moving at the roots of trees that rise like cliffs. In our time, we look up at buildings. Here, they would look up at trunks so wide they seem endless, at crowns so high. They vanish into clouds. How does a sense of scale shape a mind? Would human imagination stretch taller, striving to match what it sees? Or would humility root deeper, knowing always that life is dwarfed by the green weight of earth itself? A poetic image. A group of humans pausing in a clearing. Above them, the fronds of cycads filter sunlight into golden beams, shifting slowly in the wind. Insects glitter in the light, their wings flashing like sparks. The forest is so vast, so layered, that sound itself feels softened. Each breath of air carries resin, damp earth, the faint sweetness of primitive flowers. For a moment, they are still, as though in the center of a vast temple. Speculation flows quietly. Would early humans in such a world ever dare to build higher than these trees? Would huts, shelters, even the beginnings of villages always remain low, hidden, pressed close to the earth? Or would ambition compel them upward, into the branches, into platforms woven between trunks, building lives among the heights, to escape the creatures below? The invitation is gentle. Close your eyes and place yourself here. The ground is spongy beneath your feet, layered with needles and moss. You tilt your head upward, but the trees rise too high, their crowns swallowed by mist. The scale disorients you. You feel both small and infinite at once. In such vastness, what do you dream of? The forest does not hurry. It grows in silence, as it has for ages. And among its roots, humanity begins to imagine. To see shelter, to see ritual, to see meaning in the endless rising of trunks. The forest becomes not just a place, but a story, a memory of scale, a mirror of time. The question lingers like mist between branches. In a world where trees themselves feel like mountains, how would human spirit shape itself? Would it grow upward like the trunks, or root deeper, humble and hidden in the shadow of giants? The sun tilts. Shadows stretch longer, and the journey moves on, deeper into the wilderness of life. The forest quiets, though never fully silent. A rustle in the ferns. A distant call, harsh and guttural, echoing through the canopy. The air feels heavy, expectant, as though the world itself listens. Somewhere close, unseen but near, a predator waits. A grounding detail. In the late Cretaceous, the Earth held a remarkable diversity of carnivorous dinosaurs. Raptors, with their curved claws and keen senses, hunted in packs. Larger predators like Tyrannosaurus rex ruled plains and river valleys, jaws capable of crushing bone. Crocodilians, ancient even then, lingered in swamps, their patience measured, in hours, in days. Humanity, if present, would never walk without the weight of danger pressing on every step. Imagine small bands of humans moving cautiously, eyes scanning constantly, ears tuned to every break in rhythm. In such a world, vigilance itself becomes culture. Memory becomes survival. One glance at the movement of leaves, one faint track in mud, one strange silence in the forest. Each holds meaning. Awareness sharpens until thought itself is shaped by the predator's eye. A poetic image. A group at the river's edge, gathering water in hollowed shells. Their reflection wavers on the surface. Behind them, the forest ripples. The air shifts. A raptor emerges, sleek and silent, eyes locked, claws curved. The humans freeze. For one suspended moment, predator and prey meet in mirrored awareness. The river keeps flowing, indifferent, carrying their images downstream. Speculation drifts in softly. Could intelligence itself be born not from dominance, but from fear? Could the constant presence of predators sculpt the human mind into sharper forms, memory keener, strategy deeper, imagination broader? In our history, tools and fire carried us upward. But here, in the Mesozoic, perhaps it is not invention alone that saves us, but the ability to think like prey, to anticipate the unseen, to imagine the future before it arrives. The invitation is gentle. Place yourself in this moment. The forest thick around you, every rustle a warning. You feel the hair rise on your skin, your breath shallow, your muscles ready to move. You know you cannot outrun what hunts you. You know your body is fragile. Yet still something within you turns to thought. A plan forms. A stone in your hand. A path through the ferns. A memory of yesterday's encounter, shaping tomorrow's chance of survival. In this moment, you are prey. But you are also mind. The predator waits. The humans endure. Day after day, generation after generation, this rhythm shapes them. Not kings of the earth, but survivors in its shadows. And in those shadows, intelligence flickers, fragile yet persistent, like fire kept alive through storms. The question lingers in the air like a withheld breath. Would humans, under such relentless pressure, remain fragile? Or would they become something else? Quicker, stronger, stranger, creatures of both fear and thought, shaped forever by the gaze of the predator. The forest exhales, the night approaches, and the imagining carries us onward, deeper into the long dream of possibility. The forest hums with unseen movement, but within the shadows there is one shape unlike the others. It is not claw, nor tooth, nor wing. It is the hand. 5 fingers curling, reaching, holding. Fragile, small, almost laughably weak beside the talons of raptors or the jaws of tyrants. Yet in the hand rests something different. Something not found in scale or claw. A grounding detail. Human hands are extraordinary among primates. Our opposable thumbs allow precise grips, from the delicate threading of a needle to the swinging of a hammer. The shape of our wrist permits rotation and flexibility. Fossil studies suggest these adaptations evolved over millions of years, long before tools themselves appeared. In this alternate world, such hands would be humanity's one clear advantage against overwhelming odds. A poetic image. A human crouches in damp soil, fingers wrapped around a piece of volcanic glass. Light catches the sharp edge. With patience, with repetition, the hand shapes it further. A tool emerges, fragile yet lethal, a sliver of thought crystallized in stone. Around them, the forest roars with life, but within the circle of their fingers, a quieter revolution unfolds. Speculation drifts like smoke. Could a hand, small and soft, hold its own in a world of claws and teeth? Could grasping, carrying, shaping, become humanity's answer to power? Or would the scale of danger overwhelm the advantage, leaving the hand always one step behind? And deeper still, would the very act of holding, of shaping, awaken imagination sooner, in ways our own history did not? The invitation is gentle. Imagine your own hand in this world. Feel the soil against your palm, the weight of a stone pressed into your grip. Your skin is damp with humidity, your muscles tense with awareness of nearby predators. Yet, for a moment, you focus only on the stone. You strike it against another, a spark, a shard, a new edge. In this act, you are both vulnerable and powerful, fragile yet inventive. In such a balance, perhaps humanity's path changes. No longer mere prey, but not yet rulers. Humans become artisans of survival. Each hand a laboratory. Each tool a question, asked of the world. Can this cut? Can this carve? Can this defend? And so the hand becomes the quiet center of possibility. In the shadow of claws, it learns to mimic them. In the absence of fangs, it creates edges sharper than bone. The hand remembers. The hand dreams. The question lingers like a tremor in the soil. Is it enough? Can the curve of fingers and the patience of shaping truly stand against the scale of giants? Or is the hand merely a fragile gesture, destined to vanish in the roar of time? The forest does not answer. It simply grows, as it always has. And the hand, small and persistent, continues its work beneath the endless canopy of the age of dinosaurs. Stone lies scattered in riverbeds and at the feet of ancient cliffs, but not always. The kind that breaks to a clean, shining edge. In this wet, warm world, soils run deep and roots are thick. Rock hides beneath fern and moss as if time itself wraps it in green cloth. Hands move through this landscape alert and patient, feeling for promise in the weight of a nodule. Listening for a ring in the throat of a stone. In a place ruled by claw and tooth, the human answer, again and again, is edge. A grounding detail. The best cutting stones share a trait called conchoidal fracture, a glass-like way of breaking that yields sharp flakes. Obsidian from volcanoes, chert and flint from ancient sea muds, some forms of quartz, all of them answer the hammer with curves and lips and blades. Where such materials are scarce, early toolmakers in our own record turn to bone and antler, shaping awls, barbs, and points when stone will not oblige. In a Mesozoic basin of wetlands and shallow seas, shell and bone likely stand beside stone as equal partners in making. A river threads between cycads and conifers, shallow and warm as breath. Humans wade the bars, toes sinking into gravel, hands sorting pebbles that sparkle like fish. A fist-sized nodule of radiolarian chert lifts from the mud, an ocean memory hardened into weight. Upstream, an old volcano shoulders the sky. Along its flank, glass waits where ash once fell hot and fast. Where the river offers nothing and the mountain says no, the bodies of giants lie long after scavengers finish, leaving ribs like rafters and plates as broad as shields, the mineral of bone ready to be coaxed into form. A poetic image gathers. Rain ticks softly on fronds while a circle of figures settles into work. One anchors a core between heel and palm. Another raises a hammerstone and brings it down not with force, but with rhythm. Flakes bloom around the core like black petals, each with a feathered edge. A cut in a conifer bleeds resin that beads like amber tears. Sinew stretches between hands, pale as river light. Materials assemble the way weather assembles, without hurry, guided by patience and attention. Speculation arrives like mist. If stone is uneven and the forest's always damp, do composite tools become the human signature here? A weaving more than a single stroke? A wooden haft cradles a blade of shell. A bone point seats snug in a split shaft. A spearhead of obsidian sets into resin darkened by smoke, bound with twists of sinew. Does technology, under giant shadows, lean toward union rather than edge, toward binding rather than breaking, toward joining many small strengths into something that endures? Edges meet work. A flake of obsidian parts hide with almost no pressure, the cut so clean it seems made by light. A rib bone, ground against a river stone, narrows into a fine awl that slips through tough skins and tight fibers. From storm beaches, teeth of ancient sharks thread onto cords to become serrated saws. Scallop and oyster shells grind into scrapers that smooth wood and polish bone. Each material enters a quiet agreement with the hand. Give a little of your nature, and the hand will repay you with shape. Another grounding thread. Tree resins cure into useful glues when warmed and mixed with ash or powdered stone. Many conifers bleed readily. Chemistry is their defense. In a forest rich with sap and heat, adhesive waits wherever patience does. Plant fibers twist into cordage, 3 strands learning to become one, drawn from palm-like leaves or inner bark. When water soaks everything, bindings still hold if resin fills the gaps and smoke seals the surface. Technology breathes here not with metal, but with sap, sinew, and time. The grammar of fracture meets the grammar of growth, When stone cooperates, the ear becomes teacher, the bell of a promising nodule, the dull thud of refusal. When bone offers itself, smell and grain guide the scraping stroke. Shell teaches curve. Clay holds the memory of curve when a mold is pressed and set to dry. The workshop has no walls. It moves with the hands from bank to bank, from root to boulder, from sunlit gravel to the calm shadow of a fallen log. The sky turns with its usual indifferent grace. A pterosaur drifts over the river like a living kite. Somewhere beyond the trees, a heavy tread softens mud into shallow pools. Even so, the making persists. It cannot hurry, and it does not stop. In long wet spells, cords lengthen coil by coil along bone rafters. In brief dry days, heat hardens resin and smoke darkens. Surfaces. Edges dull and return. Handles gloss with touch. Each piece keeps a record of skin in its polish, a trace of intention in its scars. Another quiet image settles. On a broad, sun-warmed slab, tools lie arranged like a small constellation. Flakes and scrapers, awls and points, shells and teeth, fibers coiled like sleeping snakes, resin lumps caught with bits of charcoal, a bent stick that remembers being green. A single down feather spirals from the canopy and lands on the tacky resin, held fast by chance. Ground and sky join in a handle. With no name, the accident becomes token and story, a soft emblem of joining. Questions open like doors that make no sound. Do these makers begin to know certain stones and bones as companions, each with a personality revealed by work? Does myth grow around, the ribs of giants and the teeth of ancient sharks, not as trophies of victory, but as borrowed gifts? If life is framed by predator and prey, do tools become a third kind of creature, neither alive nor dead, but attending to life, carrying memory across seasons, a quiet invitation? Imagine yourself in the circle. You lift a flake from the sun-warmed slab. It rests light in your palm. You draw it once along the rib of a reed and hear the fiber sigh as it parts. You roll a lump of resin between finger and thumb and smell brightness older than speech. You twist 3 strands, and the cord tightens, a small rope learning strength under your hands. As you work, time widens. The forest breathes. You are not racing, you are listening. The river keeps its conversation with the sea. On its banks, hands keep their conversation with matter. No trumpet, no leap, only an accumulation of small agreements. A spear that flies more true, a shelter that refuses rain, a basket that keeps seeds a little longer than hunger expects. In the hush between wing shadows, a spark jumps when a flake strikes iron pyrite. Fire does not hold yet under this wet sky, but the idea of fire appears. Light released by stone, a thought glowing like an ember waiting for the season that will accept it. Night folds over. Tools lie close to sleep, set in patterns that echo the constellations, points and teeth like stars, cords like faint lines connecting them. Starlight crosses distances older than dinosaurs to rest on edges made this very day. The pieces hold, still, but they hum with uses to come. In a world of immense jaws and patient claws, the hand continues to make its way to sharpness. Not to conquer, only to remain. And the question lingers, soft as breath. If stone is rare and bone abundant, if shell cuts where flint is absent, does the river of human making bend toward other forms of beauty than the one we know? Does a civilization of resin and sinew, ribs and shells, grow toward a philosophy that honors joining more than cleaving, repair more than rupture? The forest listens. The river answers in motion. The sky lowers its wings for a while. In that quiet, the hand finishes one binding, breathes, and begins the next. Rain drifts in thin veils through the canopy, a slow percussion on frond and needle. The world breathes damp, and the damp remembers. Leaves hold water in their palms, bark drinks, soil swells with quiet surrender. In this green saturation, one small question glows faintly. Can fire live under a wet sky? A grounding detail gathers, like dew, fossil charcoal, fusain, threads through many Mesozoic sediments, a carbon shadow left when ancient forests burn. Lightning splits warm air, volcanoes cast sparks. Dry seasons, however brief, make kindling of needles and resin. Even in a humid world, wildfire arrives, then passes, leaving blackened stems and a chemistry of ash that feeds the next growth. The record says plainly, flame belongs here, though it comes and goes like weather. Humans watch the distant ridge flare orange at twilight, a slow wound opening along the horizon. They feel the heat as a rumor in the wind long before they see. Embers drift like red seeds. For a night and a day the forest sounds different. A crackle beneath the calls of creatures, a whisper that is not leaf but consumption. When rain returns, the ridge darkens into charcoal and steam. The next morning smells like memory. Sweet resin cooked to pitch, wet smoke, soil turned mineral and new. A poetic image settles in the valley. By the slick bank of a river, someone kneels over a shallow bowl of clay roughened with thumbprints. Inside, on a bed of punky wood and powdered charcoal, an ember breathes. It is not flame, not yet, merely a coal the size of a berry, red as a hidden eye. Resin beads soften near it. A curl of smoke slips upward and dissolves into rain. The ember is fed with patience, not with air, but with attention, a tiny heart being persuaded to keep beating. When downpour makes open flames stubborn, fire becomes a practice of shelter and sequence. Dryness is assembled piece by piece, ribs of driftwood split to expose pale inner grain, bark peeled and scraped into curls, old nests and pith gathered, then tucked beneath an overhang where wind stays gentle. Sinew cords spin a bow. A straight, dry spindle rests in a hearthboard that remembers hands. The rhythm is slow, like oars in slack water. Pull, return, pull, return. Heat climbing invisibly while the world around drips with indifference. Sparks, too, belong to stone. A nodule of chert meets a shard of iron pyrite and gives off brief stars. Not the blaze of noon, but a constellation in the palm, each point living for less than a breath yet promising a larger light. When the sparks fall into a nest of shredded inner bark salted with dust-fine charcoal, the nest darkens, then glows, breath becomes bellows. Flame answers at last, small, shy, a yellow tongue learning to speak in rain. Speculation moves in on quiet feet. In a world where wet is default and clear skies are interval, does culture build itself around ember more than flame? Do people carry coals the way others later carry stories, passing them from group to group in shell or clay, wrapped in the softness of moss and the patience of ash? Does the hearth become less a place and more a practice? A traveling center that never grows large enough to announce itself to teeth and talons, but always remains large enough to dry fibers, to boil a handful of river water clear, to render sap into glue, to edge the dark back a little before sleep? Resin becomes tutor. Heated gently, it melts like old light and hardens into new form. Resin mixed with ash strengthens. Resin touched with smoke resists water better. Fire here is not spectacle. It is chemistry given voice. Sinew shrinks obediently under slow warmth to tighten bindings. Shell accepts heat to curve a little more. Bone yields fat to flame and becomes less fragrant to scavengers. Clay, sun-dried until it forgets its own river, learns to hold an ember without cracking wide, and sometimes, when the season allows, hardens further in a ring of low coals into something that endures rain better than hands alone can manage. Another grounding thread. Even in persistent humidity, deadfall hides dry hearts. A split log reveals pale channels under gray skin. A rotten stump keeps a pocket of dusty pith when the surface gleams with wet. Under overhangs, twigs cure while storms rehearse themselves in the canopy. Fire lives in these small architectures of chance. The work is mostly noticing, listening for the thwack of dry wood instead of the dull knock of soaked grain, watching for the way a twig snaps with a clean letter of sound when it is ready. A quiet image forms near a stone overhang, a ring of damp, ash that no rain can quite erase, a scatter of fish bones white as crescent moons, a charred branch whose bark has lifted like scales. Above the ring, smoke has written its thin history on rock, a faint soot that rain cannot entirely convince to leave. The place is almost invisible from the forest path. It smells of past warmth more than present heat. It feels like a page that holds a single soft word and then rests. Questions open, slow and uninsistent. Does the thought of fire here lean toward steward rather than master? If flame can flare into forest and return as rain, if embers request time and carry the memory of yesterday's hands into tomorrow's morning, does philosophy bend toward the modest? Not dominion, but conversation. Not a conquering blaze, but a dialogue with wet bark and fallen branch, with resin and patience, with the moods of air. Can technology begin as humility? A learning to dwell inside weather rather than above it? A quiet invitation unfolds. Imagine cupping a coal that hums, more than glows, feeling a warmth that is intimate but not dangerous. Your breath becomes part of its life. Your hands shape wind into a small cradle. Around you the forest sighs, water drips, night birds call once and then again. You feed the ember with strands of reed pith and scrapings of inner bark until a flame unfurls no wider than a thumb. It is enough. You set a wet twig near the warmth, not in it, and listen as its damp syllables lift away. Cooked roots soften into sweetness. Seeds crack their defenses when the heat stays low and sure. A shallow stone warmed along one side becomes a flat pan for leaf and water, a quick, patient way to talk with plants and make them kinder to digestion. This is not the show of fire that leaps and devours. It is the hearth that thinks, that negotiates, that remembers that heat is a kind of time. Predators notice smoke. Predators notice everything. Firelight can announce more than it protects. In the Mesozoic dark, the hearth stays veiled, built beneath overhangs, banked behind stones, reflected rather than exposed. The glow hides behind the hand the way. Thought hides behind the eye. The flame learns to be quiet. Ash learns to be blanket. Coals sleep under soil until morning returns with its layered blues. Another image, smaller than the first, a length of old bamboo, or a similar hollow stem, in this ancient flora, sits near the coals, its interior drying until it sings when tapped. Once filled with water and set near the rim of heat, it murmurs. Steam coils from its mouth like a wisp from a dream. Someone tilts the stem and drinks, and the night approves in silence. The sky keeps its wet grammar. Stars appear in gaps and then vanish behind cloud and wing. In those brief clearings, the hearth's ember seems to answer the sky in miniature, a local star, friendly to skin and thought. If the heavens remain distant, the ember teaches a closer cosmos. Transformation within reach, light that does not blind, heat that opens rather than consumes. And the question stays, steady as a coal under ash. In a world that prefers water and green, would fire remain a companion small and steady, a teacher of patience rather than power? Would human time, braided with embers and rain, grow toward a science of slowness? Adhesives cured over days, fibers dried in the lee of stones, foods coaxed gentle instead of forced, shelters smoked into resilience one dusk at a time? The rain softens. The ember, well fed, dims to a red seed and then a thought. Hands bank it with ash. Night folds over the valley and holds. The river goes on saying what rivers always say. Above the canopy, the sky forgets nothing. Below it, the hearth remembers. Enough. Between the trunks of ancient conifers and beneath the vast umbrellas of cycads, humans search for shelter. The forest itself offers cover. Fallen logs hollowed by decay, overhangs of stone, branches woven thick enough to keep the rain at bay. But in a world where storms arrive without warning, and where predators pass like shadows, shelter must be shaped more deliberately. Huts rise, not as grand architecture but as fragile enclosures, woven into the breathing fabric of the forest. A grounding detail. Even the earliest human ancestors we know of, hundreds of thousands of years ago, likely built simple structures of branches and grass. Archaeological traces of circular arrangements of stone suggest post holes, fire pits, and sleeping spaces. In this Mesozoic imagining, similar impulses appear to mark a circle, to claim a hollow, to separate the inside from the outside. The instinct to gather beneath a roof is older than history, older even than fire. A poetic image forms. At the edge of a marsh, where the soil lies soft and the air hums with insects, a circle of huts leans inward. Each is framed with branches, bent like ribs, lashed with vines, thatched with ferns and palm-like leaves. Rain beads on their surfaces, sliding down in rivulets. Smoke curls faintly from one, hidden by a screen of bark. Around the huts, footprints spread like petals, paths to the water, to the forest, to the unknown. From above, a pterosaur gliding. On slow wings would see only a patch of green. The huts blended into the forest floor, nearly invisible among the fronds. Speculation drifts in. In a world of giants, how large or small would these shelters be? Would humans build tall, to stand against the scale of sauropods, or would they tuck themselves low, pressing close to the ground, avoiding notice? Perhaps both. Small huts for rest, hidden and discreet, and larger communal shelters built into the trunks of fallen trees, where families gather for ritual and safety. Would they dare to climb higher, weaving platforms among the branches, suspended in the canopy, safe from claws on the ground? Or would the canopy itself be too alive, too full of eyes and wings to trust? The invitation is quiet. Imagine yourself crouching at the entrance of one such hut. The air inside smells of resin and earth. Fern leaves form a soft bedding, and the roof above breathes with the wind. Outside, the rain patters softly, but here it is dim, warm, enclosed. You hear distant thunder and the faint splash of a creature crossing the marsh, but inside the circle of branches you feel momentarily apart from it all, sheltered by the fragile architecture of human hands. Another grounding detail, the use of resin as waterproofing is likely here. Conifers bleed sap that hardens into amber, and humans, even early, would notice its resistance to water. Smoked leaves and bark could line a roof, improving its ability to shed storms. Technology whispers not in leaps, but in quiet layers of observation, woven into the walls of huts that stand for a season, then collapse back into the soil. And still, a question lingers. In a world so large, would shelter ever feel permanent? Or would it always feel provisional, temporary, a fragile skin between human life and the immense, indifferent wilderness? Would the sense of home mean a place, or would it mean only the circle of hands that weave branches together wherever they happen to be? A poetic image closes the scene. The storm passes. Moonlight filters through mist, falling in pale beams upon the clustered huts. The forest glitters with wet leaves. Inside, breath rises and falls, the quiet rhythm of sleep. Outside, the world stirs with the movement of giants. Between these immensities, the huts remain, small, humble, resilient, like seeds scattered. In the forest, they mark the beginning of something that waits patiently to grow. The forest holds a constant murmur, water slipping through reeds, insects sowing the air with thin threads of sound, leaves speaking in the breath of warm wind. Across that weave, deeper voices pass, the throat drum of crocodilians at dusk, the resonant horns of hadrosaurs calling through river fog, the wing croak of pterosaurs riding a thermal. In this world, quiet is not absence, but interval, a space that arrives and departs like tide. Into this soundscape, language begins to lift its first shapes, small as the curl of smoke, brave as a spark under rain. A grounding detail steadies the imagining. Some hadrosaurs carry long, tubular crests, natural resonators that likely shape, low, far-traveling calls. The fossil of a bird-like syrinx appears late in the Cretaceous, showing that complex vocal organs already exist in certain lineages. In dense forest, low frequencies travel farther. High notes fade quickly among trunks and fronds. In our own era, people develop whistled and drummed speech that rides distance, silbo across valleys, hourglass drums beneath canopy, proving that language finds paths through whatever air is given. Sound learns the forest teaches sound. Here, humans listen before they speak, because listening is older. The body reads the world. The long note pulse that means a herd is moving along the far bank. The sudden hush that means a predator draws near. The high scatter of small wings that means rain spills from a hidden edge of sky. Ears learn to separate the weave into strands, to hear through rather than over. And from that hearing, speech grows slowly, like roots following water. A poetic image gathers at twilight. A ring of huts breathes under the weight of damp leaves. Beyond them, a river carries moonlight in broken plates. A wind comes thin but warm. It presses the smell of resin and wet clay gently against the skin. In the near dark, hands lift and open, fingertips trace small arcs. A cheek clicks softly, teeth and tongue touching in a rhythm that is scarcely sound at all. On the far side of the clearing, another hand answers with a slow turning of the wrist, a shape borrowed from the sky's own wheel. Nothing rises above the insect's song, and yet meaning passes, complete as an arrow in flight. The first grammar, maybe not breath, but bone and skin. Signs shaped by wrists and shoulders, eyebrows and jaw. Meanings carried by posture and pace, by the way a foot rests or a head inclines. Silence becomes the mother tongue because silence is safer, because silence, in a world of listening predators, is a shield. Sound arrives in the clearings of night and in the safe pockets of rain, when the forest loudens enough to hide a word inside itself. Another grounding thread. In our time, human communities fashion languages that can be sung across distance, whistled along ridgelines, beaten onto skins to echo tone and rhythm. Signed languages appear wherever hands have time and company. Their complexity arises without blueprints. The capacity for language is not a single road, but a field of paths. In this Mesozoic field, the paths braid with the forest's own acoustics and shadows. Speech here leans low and long. Vowels hum close to the chest. Consonants arrive as taps and touches, shaped to slip between the larger voices. A call for water takes the weight of river mud. A warning for Talon pulls the mouth downward in a hiss that vanishes as quickly as it arrives. Names, if they exist, are probably gestures, brief as a moth's turn, heavy with memory, never raised where teeth might learn them. Speculation moves softly among trunks. If predators key to sudden movement and sharp sound, does language prefer the slow and the curved? Does grammar develop a patience that becomes philosophy? Clauses that unfold like fern, meanings that wait for their final syllables the way the moon waits to clear the canopy. Do songs exist? Perhaps only the smallest kind, sung into hands, cupped close to the lip, a lullaby contained so perfectly that the night cannot find it. A quiet invitation opens. Imagine yourself in the edge dark, knees bent, back to the rib, of a fallen conifer. The forest sings its many simultaneous songs. A shape across the clearing raises a palm and holds it mid-air, as if weighing something small and precious. You answer with a slight tilt of the head and the tapping of two fingers against your own wrist. Meaning arrives in your chest like breath. You feel it settle. You do not need to name it out loud to know it is understood. From river to ridge, sound does more than warn. It binds. A hollow log, lifted at one end and lowered, speaks a pattern that means home, intact. A pair of smooth stones, struck with a careful tempo, says, follow the water. Someone learns the interval that the forest does not echo, a spacing between beats that returns unblurred, and builds a path of sound that predators ignore as ordinary rain. Language finds the spare channels in the earth's noise and the sky's percussion, the way roots find the seam between rock and soil. A grounding detail returns to the creatures who share the air. Crocodilians call with infrasonic pulses that tremble the surface of water. Large throats move ground as well as air. If low sound travels, might humans lean their backs to trunks and listen to messages sent as rhythm through wood? Knock song might travel beneath leaf and wing where breath speech cannot. A tapping grammar may rise, not to shout across distance but to speak confidently inside the rootwork of a grove. The forest becomes instrument. The grove holds a vocabulary particular to its bones. In this sound weather, children learn first, to read the world and then to answer it. Breath speech comes after hand speech. Hand speech comes after eye speech. The eyes notice, the hands agree. The breath confirms. No order is permanent. At night, when insects thicken the air with needle-bright threads, breath speech expands. At noon, when heat presses and the world grows heavy, hands keep most of the load. When storm rain strikes leaves and trunks, the drum returns. A poetic image leans close. Under a rock overhang, smoke writes its faint script along stone. Below it, marks gather. Not letters, not yet, but grooves and dots placed where fingers can find them in darkness. A set of shallow pits arranges itself into a rhythm the hand can count. Palm over palm, the sequence repeats, meaning stored in rock as in a quiet drum that waits to be struck. Memory becomes tactile, a text for fingertips. The forest hums, a small archive hides in plain touch. Questions rise like slow bubbles in warm water. If language grows amid roar, does eloquence become the art of restraint? Does wisdom become the skill of leaving out the sound that summons teeth? Do stories carry more gesture than voice, more pause than word? Narratives that travel by the choreography of hands and the patience of breath, told under canopies where stars appear between wings? Another invitation arrives, lighter than the first. Imagine cupping your hands before your mouth and shaping a whistle not by pitch, but by intent. A curve that means river bend, a spiral that means shell, a low slide that means fire banked in ash. You do not seek volume, you seek transparency. The note threads itself through insect song and leaf speech and returns to you from the dark as if carried there by the forest itself. Grounding returns finally to the stars. On clear nights, constellations cross high and cold, the same elsewhere eyes learn to name. Here, the names might be motions. A two-handed sweep for the long river of light, a soft opening of fingers for the cluster that looks like seeds thrown into black earth. A mirrored turn of wrists for the pair that chase each other's tails. The sky becomes a theater for the body's language. The body remembers the sky in its joints. The forest accepts and refuses in equal measure. Some words vanish into cricket thread and frog drone. Others ride under leaf and along route until they arrive. Language learns humility from this, and also improvisation. It grows the way the river grows, by finding a way around what blocks and a way through what softens. And perhaps, with time, it learns to ask questions as carefully as a hand chooses tinder. One question lingers like a low note at the edge of hearing. In a world that regales itself with voices older and larger than our own, does human language become a kind of listening more than a kind of speech? If so, what kind of thinking grows from that? One that greets the roar not with challenge but with accommodation, that measures wisdom in the ability to be understood without being found. The night deepens. Somewhere beyond the huts, water drums a little harder against a bank. In the overhang's dimness, a palm rests against a groove that means return. The air smells of resin and wet earth. A single moth crosses the flame and does not burn. And the conversation, hands, breath, stone, continues, quiet as moonlight moving across a leaf. Shadows move before the bodies that cast them. On warm ground under cycads and conifers, a long dusk passes when giants stride between tree and river, and their silhouettes travel first, rippling over fern and bark, arriving like omens that touch the eye before sound can reach the ear. In such weather of presence, consciousness learns to live on the leading edge of events, reading the world by its prefaces, not its declarations. Minds grow in the penumbra. A grounding detail steadies. The imagining. Biologists speak of a nocturnal bottleneck for early mammals, a long era when twilight and night become refuge from daylit hunters. Many lineages carry signatures of that darkness: wide pupils, sensitive whiskers, an acute sense of smell. Predation pressure shapes attention. Stress hormones deepen the imprint of certain memories, especially those bound to fear and place. The hippocampus, archivist of roots and rooms, collaborates with the amygdala, sentinel of urgency. In a world of titans, memory and emotion braid early and tightly. Maps of space carry the flavor of survival. A poetic image unfolds at the forest's margin. Dusk smolders on a broad river like iron, warmed just shy of red. From far upstream, a low roll of footfalls travels through ground, more felt than heard, a slow drum whose rhythm the body recognizes without needing a name. In the leaf-brimmed shallows, small ripples tilt moonlight. On a sandbar, a print as wide as a human chest fills with water, one patient spoonful at a time. The air thickens. Shadows lengthen until they become the night. Under such roofs of threat and scale, thought wears long, fine whiskers of its own. Awareness stretches forward in time and laterally across possibility. What if that rustle is wind? What if it is not? What if the river runs higher tonight and covers the crossing? What if the ridge holds a path that the heavy ones cannot take? Each question is not panic, it is practice. Anticipation becomes a kind of craft, a way to sit in the seam between what has happened and what will, the way a bird perches in the still air between two gusts. Another grounding thread. Paleontologists infer that many large carnivorous dinosaurs hold sharp senses, forward-facing eyes for depth, nasal passages complex enough to suggest refined smell, inner ears tuned for balance and low-frequency sound. In forests dense as thought, prey that survives must outinterpret more often than it outruns. Vigilance selects for pattern-finding, for the ability to notice when the ordinary becomes slightly otherwise. In time, that noticing ripens into story. Not the kind with heroes and endings, but the kind the nervous system tells itself to. Stay in one piece. Speculation places a gentle hand on the shoulder of this scene. Perhaps consciousness in such a world grows with an emphasis on margin and threshold, a love of edges, a sensitivity to first signs. Perhaps the earliest self-talk is a low-voiced inventory of entrances and exits, of climbable branches, of water silent enough to hide a footfall. Perhaps what later becomes ethics begins as etiquette with danger. Do not startle the forest. Do not announce with flame. Do not make a promise to the night that the day cannot keep. An invitation draws near, soft and slow. Imagine the mind as a pool where sky and leaves reflect. A ripple crosses when a distant footfall travels through root and soil. The surface holds both the leaf and its echo, both the star and the tremor. In that layered image, choices begin to appear. Turn left toward the stone overhang where smoke stains speak of old safety. Turn right to the reed beds that conceal but also entangle. Wait for the nightbird to call once more, if it calls. At all, the path is clear. If it falls silent, the path is claimed by something with teeth. The mind learns to move only after the world has answered. As nights accumulate, dreams begin their own quiet labor. REM sleep, in our time, rehearses and recombines. The brain runs soft simulations in the dark, testing paths without risking muscle or bone. Under the Mesozoic canopy, dreams likely carry talon and river, wing shadow, and resin smell. The amygdala sparks. The hippocampus arranges. Morning arrives with a sense of déjà vu that is not superstition but rehearsal remembered. This bend, that log, the way moonlight glances off a crocodilian eye. Consciousness practices while the body rests. A small image holds still in the grass. A scatter of pebbles along a river path, placed not in lines but in intervals the foot can feel even without looking. A rhythm underfoot says, "Turn here." Elsewhere, a thin twig arches above a low notch in a log. Not a trap, only a sign for those who know to stoop, invisible to those who do not read with knees and shoulders. These are not technologies of force, but of attention, shaped to whisper to a mind trained to hear small differences. The world becomes annotated in touch and spacing, in the grammar of slight adjustments. Grounding returns to the sky. Night after night, the same long river of starlight leans across the canopy. In a life built under imminent bodies, the far distances offer a paradoxical steadiness. Constellations, whether named or gestured, move predictably. The moon conducts the tides of rivers and the moods of creatures. For a mind that spends each day in the 10-second future, the time it takes a heavy thing to reach a clearing, the months and seasons teach a longer breath. Memory rests against that greater metronome and finds it can stretch without breaking. Questions glide in the wake of this longer rhythm. If consciousness grows under pressure to anticipate, does it become a kind of weather sense, a humility that measures what it cannot command? Does philosophy begin not with "why are we here," but with "how shall we pass through without leaving a wound that returns"? Does the idea of self loosen a little, shaped by constant attention to signals that arrive from outside skin and bone? The quietly radical possibility that mind and forest, mind and river, mind and sky are in ongoing conversation. A poetic scene returns to the body. Dawn edges into gray. Mist lifts from the river in thin banners. In the ferns, a path appears not as bent stems but as a faint coolness where feet passed hours ago. A patch of moss holds water differently where a hand, pressed, the air carries a new thread of scent, resin broken by a fresh cut, or the mineral breath of turned stone. Consciousness, tuned by millions of moments like these, assembles a present that includes several different yesterdays and more than one possible afternoon. It is not foreknowledge, it is companionship with probability. Another detail of the interior landscape. With threats so near, the nervous system cannot afford to flare without end. Habituation is mercy. It damps noise so the true signal can rise. Children learn to sort the world's relentless percussion, insects, drips, leaf speech, into background. Then a single new note, low and steady, tilts the whole field. Attention reaches out like a hand for balance. In that reach, neurons that fire together wire together. Patterns become pathways. The next time, the reach arrives faster and with less fear. Learning is simply the forest acquiring roots inside the skull. An invitation soft as moss opens again. Imagine sitting very still until the bodies of giants pass invisible, known only by their shadows and the rain of small leaves. Shaken loose, the mind does not fight the feeling of smallness. It lets the feeling teach scale. In that scale, a plan grows not larger but finer. A delay of a breath and a half, a sidestep to let a twig's crack be blamed on wind, a wait for a wing shadow, to swing back so movement hides in movement. The plan feels like water finding a lower place. It is not triumph, it is fit. Speculation looks ahead with downcast eyes. If such minds survive long enough to gather into villages and seasons, do they build cultures that honor thresholds, dusk rituals, dawn silences, mid-river pauses? Do they craft ethics from attentiveness? A value placed on those who notice first and speak last, on caretakers of ember and map and memory. Does art arise as a language of gradients? Ochre washed thin over rock to suggest the way shadow, dilates around a moving leg, charcoal smeared with fingertip to render the breath around a flank at night. Perhaps beauty becomes the art of the almost, the worship of the just before. The river keeps its long sentence, and the sky answers with a slower one. Between them, consciousness stands like a stone in current, not to stop the water, only to feel it clearly. The shadow of a giant leans across that stone and then departs. In the wake, the surface shines. One question remains, steady as a star seen through cloud. If minds awaken and mature beneath shadows this large, do they learn a tenderness for smallness that never leaves them? And if so, when the world someday offers them tools that can make their shadows large, will they remember the old posture, the way attention saved them better than noise, the way humility kept them alive? The forest does not answer. It goes, on breathing. The stone keeps its cool. The river writes its next line. Above it all, wing passes over light, and shadow teaches again. The forest is never still. Each hour carries the press of something larger, heavier, hungrier than the fragile bodies that walk upright among ferns. To live here is to live under constant arithmetic, the measure of risk against the measure of need. Step too far into, water and jaws may close from below. Wander too far from cover and wings may dive from above. Even when the clearing is quiet, the silence feels weighted, as if held by invisible teeth. A grounding detail whispers through fossil memory. Predator-prey ratios in ecosystems often tilt toward the many herbivores sustaining the few carnivores, but the carnivores, though rare, shape the lives of all. In the Cretaceous, apex hunters, like Tyrannosaurus or Giganotosaurus, roam ranges vast enough to cross human settlements with ease. Crocodilians in the rivers grow longer than canoes, armored like warships. Smaller predators, swift and clever, fill the underbrush. For humanity in such a world, life itself is measured in margins. A poetic image takes form. Along the edge of a swamp, humans gather reeds to weave into mats. The work is quiet, the rhythm of hands moving with patience. Yet no back turns fully to the water. One pair of eyes always lifts, scanning the surface, watching for the faint distortion of scales. Another ear listens for the hush of wings above the trees. The task continues, but never without the sense of being observed. The reeds themselves seem to whisper, "Be quick, be quiet, be cautious." Speculation enters softly. What kind of culture rises when fear is not occasional but constant? Do rituals emerge that give voice to vigilance, chants or gestures meant to sharpen awareness? Do communities gather at dawn and dusk not simply to eat, but to recount the movements of predators, creating a memory map of danger woven from story and warning? Perhaps language itself bends toward the vocabulary of risk, rich in words for silence, shadow, and sign, sparse in words for permanence. Another grounding thread. Many animals today live with this constant negotiation. Herds of antelope move, with heads lifted, scanning while grazing. Birds call out warnings specific to hawks, to snakes, to ground predators. Humans, with wider memory and keener imitation, may encode such warnings into stories. Myths of winged hunters, clawed shadows, jaws that emerge from water. Over generations, these stories blur into religion, into cosmology. The predators of the forest become not just animals, but archetypes, shaping the inner lives of those who survive them. An invitation settles in. Close your eyes and imagine sitting in a circle at twilight. The air is thick, the forest restless. A storyteller lifts a hand, tracing the curve of a claw in the air. The others watch, silent, remembering the day's narrow escape. The gesture becomes a pattern, repeated, refined. Soon it is no longer just a warning. It is a story, a myth of the claw that belongs to night itself. You feel your breath slow as you watch. Fear has become ritual, transformed into something you can hold. A poetic image follows. Painted onto stone with charcoal and resin, a set of deep grooves marks the silhouette of a predator. Not detailed, only the curve of teeth, the sweep of tail. Around it, handprints cluster, small and human, pressed like petals around a dark flower. The wall becomes both memory and offering, both record and prayer. The predator is always there, but now it also belongs to the human imagination. Yet the question lingers. Would such a culture shaped in the economy of fear ever dream of conquest? Or would it always remain cautious, careful, preferring survival to domination? Would its wisdom be measured not in expansion, but in the subtle art of remaining unnoticed? The night deepens. Somewhere in the swamp, a ripple spreads outward, circles, widening in silence. A hut roof glimmers with wet, its smoke already banked low. The humans inside breathe together, the rhythm steady, unbroken. Outside, the economy of fear continues its quiet work, shaping minds, shaping stories, shaping futures. Night descends slowly across the Mesozoic earth. The last cries of hadrosaurs fade into the distance, replaced by the chorus of insects and the low groaning calls of creatures unseen. Above the canopy, the sky unfolds itself in ancient clarity. Stars burn steady, their light millions of years old, falling upon a world that does not yet know cities, roads, or telescopes. And yet the constellations are here, the same rivers of fire, the same scattered seeds of light that will one day guide ships and calendars, stories and science. A grounding detail rests here. Astronomers tell us that the major constellations, as we know them, would have looked almost the same 100 million years ago. The stars are so distant that even in deep time, their positions shift only slightly. The same Orion, the same Pleiades, the same Milky Way arching overhead. To a Mesozoic human, the sky would appear as familiar as it does to us, though utterly without the framework of myth that later civilizations weave. A poetic image rises, a group of humans huddled on a ridge at night, the forest quiet below them. The air smells of resin and ash. Above, the Milky Way stretches like a river of dust and fire. A child lifts a hand, tracing shapes in the air, a curve here, a cluster there, eyes wide as though seeing something not outside but within. The sky becomes a mirror, reflecting the patterns of thought beginning to form. Speculation drifts gently. Would these humans, pressed by predators on the ground, look upward more often than we do? Would the sky become their sanctuary? A place free of tooth and claw? Or would it deepen their sense of smallness, reminding them that they are not only fragile among giants, but fragile in the cosmos itself? Perhaps both. Perhaps awe and fear mingle here, as they always have, in the endless question of what lies beyond. The invitation is soft. Imagine lying back on warm stone, the ground beneath you still radiating the day's heat. Around you, the forest sighs with life, but above you, the stars open without limit. You follow one point of light as it drifts across the heavens, not knowing it is a planet, not yet. To you, it is simply a wanderer, a moving fire. You close your eyes, and even then, the pattern of stars lingers on your lids, as though memory itself is written in light. Another grounding thread. Comets, too, would have crossed this sky, as they always have, icy messengers from the far reaches of the solar system. To humans of the Mesozoic, such appearances may have carried awe or dread, a sudden bright streak across the heavens interpreted as a sign. And meteor showers, brief and radiant, would cut through the night with their burning trails, perhaps inspiring the first stories of fire falling from the sky. A poetic image closes the scene. At the edge of a clearing, a circle of stones cradles a hidden ember. Smoke rises faintly, curling toward the stars. Above, the constellations wait in silence, unchanged, eternal. The humans watch, eyes reflecting starlight, hearts measuring time not in years or seasons, but in the steady, endless rhythm of the night sky. And the question lingers, soft as starlight itself. In a world so perilous, would the sky become humanity's first sanctuary, their first canvas for wonder? Or would it remain forever distant, a mystery too vast to claim? The stars continue their patient drift. The earth turns beneath them, and thought, fragile and luminous, turns with it. The river bends wide, carrying moonlight like broken glass. Its surface looks calm, but beneath, shadows drift. Long, armored, patient. Crocodilians older than memory slide just below the skin of the water, their eyes rising like small lanterns, their bodies hidden in darkness. For humans in the Mesozoic, water is both lifeline and peril, a mirror that reflects stars but also hides jaws. A grounding detail. Fossils show that crocodilians of the Cretaceous reached immense sizes, some stretching more than 10 meters, heavier than any boat the first humans could shape. In warm, shallow seas, marine reptiles, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, ruled as apex predators. And yet these same waters brim with fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and plants offering food, too abundant to ignore. For fragile humans, the edge of water is both gift and gamble. A poetic image. Dawn spills gold across a lagoon. Mist rises, soft as breath. Along the shore, a small group of humans wades carefully, weaving nets from reeds, their cords knotted, with patient fingers. Each step is tentative, the water lifting around their knees. Beyond them, a plesiosaur surfaces, its long neck slicing upward before vanishing again. The humans freeze, the nets trembling in their hands. The silence deepens, broken only by the sound of their own breath. Speculation unfolds like ripples. Would humanity, pressed by predators on land, turn to the water as refuge? Would they learn to float villages upon rafts of reeds, tethered to the shore but drifting just beyond reach of claws? Would they become, not land dwellers as in our history, but river people, lagoon people living always at the boundary between safety and risk? Perhaps their technologies, nets, fish traps, woven boats, would arrive sooner, born not of curiosity, but necessity. The invitation is quiet. Imagine yourself sitting at the edge of a tidal pool. The water glimmers with small fish, darting. In flashes of silver. You dip your hand in slowly, feeling the coolness ripple against your skin. Behind you, the forest breathes, heavy and alive. Before you, the water stretches wide, reflecting a sky filled with slow-moving clouds. For a moment, it feels as though the whole world is divided. Land behind you, sea before you, and you are perched at the fragile seam between the two. Another grounding thread. Archaeology tells us that even in our own deep past, humans turned to coasts and rivers early. Shell middens tens of thousands of years old record the harvest of mollusks, crabs, and fish. In a Mesozoic world, the abundance of shallow seas may have offered similar nourishment and perhaps also safety, for in the water, giant land predators could not follow. Yet safety is never absolute. In the water, new hunters wait. Survival becomes a practice of balance, shifting, always between two dangers, two gifts, a poetic closing image. Dusk gathers. Fires burn low beneath shelters of reed and branch. Beyond them, the river glows faintly in starlight, a silver road leading outward into the unknown. On its surface, ripples cross and vanish, carrying the memory of something passing beneath. The humans sit near the shore, eyes reflecting both flame and water, knowing that tomorrow they will return, because the river is both peril and promise, and life itself depends upon its shimmering edge. The question lingers like a current beneath. Thought, would humans of this world belong more to land or to water? Or would they forever walk the seam between, never fully claimed by either, always dwelling in the fragile in-between? The river answers only with its flow, endless, unbroken, carrying stars across its dark surface. The question turns from water to soil. In a world of giants, can a small hand teach plants a patient companionship? The canopy leans heavy with fronds and needles. Flowers are newcomers here, quiet and few, testing forms the world will later celebrate. Agriculture, as later ages know it, fields opened to sun, neat rows, harvests timed by calendar, does not sit easily under this crowded green. And yet, human hunger is inventive. Where fruit is sparse and seeds are armored, the mind seeks another door into the larder of the earth. A grounding detail takes root. Flowering plants, the angiosperms that now fill markets and meadows, begin their broad rise in the Cretaceous, but they do not yet rule. Conifers, ginkgos, cycads, and tree. Ferns still shape much of the forest. Even so, early grasses already exist. Scientists find their microscopic silica bodies, phytoliths, inside dinosaur dung, proof that lawns of a sort ripple along river margins. Cycads hold starchy hearts and seeds potent with toxins. Peoples in our own time learn to leach those, poisons, and make flour. Araucaria relatives drop heavy cones with seeds rich as pine nuts. The world offers. The offering requires conversation. A poetic image gathers at the edge of an inland sea. Humans kneel among low swales of silt that a flood left behind, pressing shoots into damp soil. No formal garden, only a memory of places where edible things tend to appear. They set a border of driftwood and stone around the patch, not to mark ownership, but to say to heavy feet, step elsewhere. Reed mats lift young roots away from mud, a cradle for seedlings that the river would otherwise take. Above, clouds move like thought, slow and diffuse. Speculation arrives like a soft tide. Perhaps agriculture begins here not as conquest, but as tending. Not plow and furrow, but coaxing and shelter. Moving a plant a few paces toward better light, tucking compost under its leaves, shading it with woven screens of fern during a hot week. Perhaps gardens live in fragments, in shaded corners and on rafts of reeds, in pockets of sand on a rock ledge, in baskets hung from branches just high enough that small beaks and quick jaws cannot reach. The invitation is gentle. Imagine lifting a young cycad seed from its husk, hands smelling of resin and wet earth. You do not eat it. You take it to the river, where water runs clear over sun-warmed stones. You slice the seed thin with an obsidian flake and lay the slices in a woven pouch, then anchor it in the current. Hours pass, then days. The river speaks, through the fibers as toxins wash forward. A small chemistry unfolds beneath the surface. Patient, repetitive, kind. You are not erasing the plant's defense. You are asking it to share. Another grounding thread? Many forest peoples learn that the inner bark of certain conifers can be dried and ground for food. Tree ferns carry a pith that feeds when handled correctly. Ginkgo seeds, fragrant and difficult, become delicacies after careful roasting. In a Cretaceous pantry, such knowledge would not be luxury, but survival. The cambium's sweet band becomes a lean season treat. The broad seed of an ancient conifer, roasted on a flat stone, splits with a sigh and reveals a pale kernel rich in oil. Agriculture here also looks sideways, into water, into partnership with the small beings who do most of the world's living. Mushrooms arrive after rains where deadwood stacks beneath overhangs. Hands learn the local grammar of cap and gill, separating the friends from the fierce, saving logs that fruit generously and moving them to safer, drier places. Insects, too, become part of the plan. Mid-Cretaceous bees already visit early flowers. Honey may be rare or hidden, but sweetness concentrates in hollows and under bark, and smoke whispers bees into gentleness. Grub-rich rotting logs deliver fat to the fire when game is scarce. The garden of this world includes what crawls and swarms. A poetic image forms on a floodplain at dawn. Rectangular floats of woven reeds ride the shallows, tethered by braided cords to buried stones. On their backs, soil cradles shoots of early, grasses, sprawling vines with small sticky fruits, and a scatter of river herbs whose leaves perfume water when bruised. The floats drift and lift with the tide. Heavy feet do not trample what water lightly holds. A heron steps between the rafts like a slow idea. Beneath the planks, a small fish knows the shadows, and a child leans over to watch, hair gilded by the first light. Speculation asks softly, if fields cannot stay open under dinosaur feet, do gardens learn to float, to hang, to climb? Do humans weave ladders of vine and wood up the sides of wind-thrown trunks, setting baskets of soil on platforms, where sun filters more kindly and browsers cannot lift their heads so high? Do they seed sandbars while the river runs low, then harvest quickly when the season turns, treating time as a crop as much as any plant? Another grounding detail returns to soil. Cycads partner with bacteria in special roots that fix nitrogen, a quiet improvement of poor ground. People who notice that certain plants enrich the beds near them may move those companions together, composing little ecologies instead of single crops. The language of agriculture in this age learns not rows but constellations, a nitrogen friend near a hungry neighbor, a shade giver beside a moisture lover, a tangle that looks messy to eyes expecting geometry, but reads as grace to those who live in woven worlds. Food safety becomes ritual. Leaching stations sit in the shallows, strings of pouches fluttering in clear current like fish. Fermentation vessels of clay and gourd hide under leaves near low coals, not to boil, but to invite. Slow transformations. The huts smell faintly of yeast and resin, of wet stone and smoke. Children learn early that bitterness often means wait, that sweetness is sometimes the end of a long patience. The memory of poison avoids the mouth by moving first through story. A gesture means soak. A tap of 2 fingers means scrape. A spiral traced on the palm means wait until the moon is thin. A poetic image of color and texture closes in. A wall inside a shelter carries smears of ochre and ash, not figures of animals, but patches of hue, each tied to a season. Next to a red-brown field, a small bed of shell powder glints. Each patch matches a taste. The red means roasted cone kernel, the green-black means leached cycad flour patties, the pale shell means salt scraped from a dry tide pool and stored in a horn. It is a pantry painted for memory, a kitchen that the eye can read. Questions settle like seeds on damp soil. Does agriculture begun under such pressure remain gentle even if safety grows? Does the habit of tending, of asking plants, to meet humans halfway, persist as ethic? If food is the result of partnership rather than dominion, does gratitude become as practical as skill? And if storms and predators can erase a garden overnight, do people learn to plant more often and in more places, trading concentration for resilience, abundance for spread? The invitation returns. Picture your hands pressing a mixture of leached flour and crushed cone seeds into a thin cake. You lay it on a flat stone warmed near coals, not over them, and listen as moisture whispers away. The cake lifts clean when it is ready. You break it and share it, and the sharing tastes like a map of river and resin and patience. Outside, heavy footsteps pass at a distance. The garden floats slightly in its cords. Nothing is permanent, and yet this moment is full. A final grounding. Note leans toward the grasses. Along backwaters, early grasses bend in wind, shedding seeds small and many. Hands sweep them, then winnow with patient breath, then grind them between stones until the smell of green changes into the smell of dough. No rows, no plows, just the first agreements with a family of plants that will one day feed cities. Here they feed a ring of people under a roof of woven fronds while a wing shadow crosses and goes. The day softens. Tools are rinsed, baskets hung. On the reed rafts, leaves turn their flat faces toward a low sun. The river carries away what the leaching pouches offer and brings back clarity. Above, insects thread the air between the flowers that dare the shade. Agriculture remains a quiet verb, to tend, to move a plant slightly, to protect it from a hoof, to coax it from bitter to kind, to hope through storms. And the question lingers like a scent after rain. If food is grown as a set of small mercies spread across water and wood, does a different kind of civilization result? Less monuments, more gardens, less clearing, more conversation, less claim, more care? The forest does not argue. It keeps growing. The river answers by going where it must. The humans eat, softly, gratefully, and the night begins to gather its patient blue around the rafts and the huts and the small green flames of leaves that learned, with help, to share. The forest floor trembles with footsteps heavier than thunder. Long-necked sauropods move like living hills, their tails sweeping arcs through air thick with insects. In the underbrush, smaller dinosaurs dart with sharp eyes and sharper claws. Above, wings drift on thermals, shadows crossing rivers and huts. Alike. Humans here are not the sole intelligence of the earth. They are surrounded by creatures vast in scale and strange in form, and so the quiet wondering arises. Could there be partnership, rather than only fear? A grounding detail anchors the thought. Evidence suggests that some smaller dinosaurs may have been quick, social, even capable of complex behaviors. Birds, their living descendants, show memory, problem-solving, and even the ability to mimic sounds. In our own history, humans turned wolves into companions, cattle into sustenance, horses into allies of travel. Could a similar bond emerge here in the Mesozoic? Not with the towering titans, perhaps, but with smaller, more adaptable species. A poetic image. Dawn mist hangs low over a clearing. A cluster of humans stirs from sleep, stretching, feeding embers with dry twigs. From the shadows at the clearing's edge, small feathered raptors watch, cautious but curious. They do not approach, but neither do they flee. They tilt their heads, eyes glinting with reflected fire. The humans glance back, offering no threat, only stillness. Between them stretches a silence thick with possibility, as though two different minds listen to the same morning. Speculation flows like a quiet river. Could humans offer food scraps at the edge of camp, teaching raptors that their presence is not always met with stones or spears? Could over generations a fragile truce emerge, the raptors learning that proximity brings reward, the humans learning that alert companions notice predators first? Would such a partnership be trust, or mutual exploitation? Could the line between them blur, just as wolves once blurred into dogs? Another grounding thread. Many dinosaurs bore feathers, not only for flight but for warmth and display. Smaller species may have looked less like reptiles and more like strange, ancient birds, with quick eyes and agile movements. Imagine them, perched in branches near human camps, watching, waiting, scavenging. Over time, their presence might become familiar, their cries woven into the human understanding of the forest's language. A sudden alarm call could warn of larger predators. A shift in their movement could signal danger. In this way, partnership may arise not from taming, but from listening. An invitation opens. Close your eyes and picture yourself sitting near a small fire at dusk. The air smells of resin and smoke. Beyond the circle of huts, you hear a rustle. A cluster of small feathered shapes, eyes glimmering in half-light. They are not tame, not safe, yet they do not strike. You toss a scrap of roasted root into the dark. It disappears. A moment later, a soft call echoes from the trees, a sound you have begun to recognize. It is warning you. You listen more carefully than before. A poetic image closes the scene. On the walls of a cave, a painting takes shape, not only of giants, not only of threats, but of smaller creatures drawn close to the circle of humans. Handprints cluster beside them, as though marking kinship. Whether myth, memory, or hope, it is hard to tell. The figures remain, painted in ash and resin, enduring beyond the moment when eye met eye across the morning mist. And the question lingers, fragile as breath. Could humans, in the age of dinosaurs, have built not only tools against them, but bonds beside them? Would survival mean solitude, or the strange companionship of minds so different, yet moving through the same forest of time? The forest does not answer. It only listens, as wings pass overhead and footsteps echo in the deep earth below. Stone holds memory. Beneath the canopy where light seldom reaches, caves open like mouths in the earth, their ceilings dripping with slow water, their walls smooth and waiting. For humans in the Mesozoic, these hollows become more than shelter. They become pages, canvases, mirrors. In their shadows, story finds a surface. A grounding detail. In our own deep past, some of the earliest known cave art dates back more than 40,000 years. Hands pressed in ochre, silhouettes of animals etched with charcoal, patterns of dots, and spirals whose meaning lingers beyond reach. Archaeologists suggest these marks served as ritual, record, memory, or dream. In this imagining, the impulse is the same: to leave trace, to press thought into stone, to make silence visible. A poetic image forms. Deep within a cave, faint light from a smoldering ember casts flickering shadows. A hand, coated in resin mixed with ash, presses against the wall. When it lifts away, the print remains, small, human, impossibly fragile against the immensity of time. Beside it, a dark curve takes shape, the arc of a tail, the outline of a claw. Around these marks, dots cluster like stars, scattered but deliberate. The wall becomes a night sky of memory, a place where giants live not only in fear but in story. Speculation drifts softly. Would early humans here paint the predators that haunted them, or the companions they imagined into being? Would they sketch the towering sauropods as gods or as shadows? Would the act of painting be protection, as though drawing the creature, bound it to the wall, taming it with pigment? Or would it be reverence, an acknowledgement of the vastness they shared? The invitation is gentle. Imagine stepping into one of these caves. The air is cool, heavy with the smell of stone and dampness. You hold a small ember, its glow barely illuminating the walls. As you move deeper, faint shapes begin to emerge. Hands, animals, spirals. Some are clear, others fading with moisture. And time. You place your palm against one print, feeling the groove left by another human in another age. The connection is immediate, timeless. You are not alone. Another grounding thread. Geologists remind us that caves preserve what forests cannot. Storms erase huts, rivers scatter rafts, but stone remembers. Charcoal smears, handprints, grooves, these survive beyond lifetimes. If humans had existed in the Mesozoic, their caves might still bear those marks, hidden beneath layers of rock, waiting in silence for discovery. The question is not only what they painted, but whether we would ever recognize it as human. A poetic image closes. In the deepest chamber where no light enters, a figure kneels, tracing spirals on stone with fingertips coated in ochre. The spiral widens outward, a path without end, echoing the motion of galaxies above, the whirl of shells below, the turning of time itself. The figure pauses, breath slow, listening to the cave's quiet. Outside, giants pass through the forest. Inside, a human dream takes shape, fragile yet enduring, and the question lingers, soft as the drip of water in darkness. If humans had painted the walls of Mesozoic caves, would those marks survive the turning of continents, the rise and fall of seas? Or would their memory be lost, dissolved into stone, waiting unseen beneath the weight of ages? The cave does not answer. It holds silence, and in that silence the marks endure. The ground remembers the ocean. It heaves, sighs, and splits. It lifts mountains and lowers basins. It drinks coastlines and gives them back. In this age of giants, the earth is not a stage but a participant, busy with its own migrations. Continents do not yet rest in the positions the future will call familiar. They drift as rafts of stone on a slow, deep current, and the seams between them burn with new rock. To live here is to live upon a map that edits itself while footsteps still press the ink. A grounding detail steadies the vision. Geologists speak of plate tectonics, the long breakup of Pangaea into northern Laurasia and southern Gondwana, a process that begins in the Triassic and continues through the Jurassic into the Cretaceous. Seafloor spreading writes magnetic stripes into basalt, a barcode of reversals that proves the ocean grows from its bright seams. In the late Cretaceous, the western interior seaway cuts the heart of a continent, turning plains to archipelago, while the warm Tethys laps at the edges of drifting lands. Volcanic provinces flare. Rift valleys lengthen. The world remakes its shoreline with patience and surprise. A poetic image surfaces at dusk. A line of humans stands on a headland of new basalt, still dark and glassy where last season's lava, cooled to wrinkled ropes. The rock retains the day's heat like a sleeping animal. Beyond the cliff, the sea breathes in long exhalations. Its surface reddens under a thin cloud where the sun dissolves. Far offshore, a chain of infant islands beads the horizon, smoke rising from one as if the ocean wears a faint crown of fire. The people do not rush. They watch the evening rewrite the edge between water and sky, and they begin to imagine a path that did not exist in their grandparents' time. Speculation moves carefully, step by slow step. When coasts advance and retreat, do migrations become circular, guided by tides not only of the moon but of years and decades? Do routes braid along the new archipelagos, seasonal crossings made, in reed craft that seek the lee of fresh volcanic shoulders? When an inland sea rises, do communities split and learn separate literacies of wind and current, their languages diverging the way rivers do? Do they measure the shore with cords knotted? For headlands and coves, a portable coastline that can be retied when a storm redraws the real one in a single night? Another grounding thread lifts from stone. Ash falls from distant vents and settles into lakes, thin gray leaves layered between seasons of mud. In our time, those ash beds become timekeepers, tufts rich with zircons whose clocks, once read, mark moments with precision. The people of this older age do not read isotopes, but they feel the rhythm of ash and rain. They learn that certain fishes come after certain powders, that certain mushrooms love the soot of certain winds. The volcano speaks chemistry. The village answers with harvest and caution. The earth's breath is not only fire, it is motion without flame. A tremor arrives like a low animal moving underfoot. Ferns whisper with their own friction. A minor fall of stones ticks along a slope. Sometimes the water pulls away from shore as if inhaled, showing ribcage bars of sand the sea usually keeps to itself. Sometimes it returns with a wall of insistence. On coasts that learn both gestures, paths to high ground become part of memory, the way constellations do. Hands build cairns at the feet of old trees, stone spines that point up slope like frozen lightning. Children trace those lines with play and grow into their meanings without ceremony. A quiet invitation opens. Imagine standing barefoot on a spit of new sand, the kind that crunches with young shells. Under the soles, a thin thrum passes too, slow for sound, too steady for fear, a bass note in the bones. The horizon leans by a hair's breadth. Far away, a winged silhouette turns above a fresh island. Closer in, the swash line falters in its counting. A hand touches your shoulder. Not a command, only a shared noticing. Footprints that point inland begin to appear alongside your own. You turn. The hill waits the way a door waits, already open. Questions follow the path like light among leaves. If continents continue their long drift through the human span, does navigation prefer the sky or the stone? Do people keep star maps on bark, a spray of white dots for the river of the night, a thin inked line for the track of the wandering lights, and also carry coastlines in their pockets as knotted cords? And pocket pebbles? When a land bridge dries between two islands, do they call it a day road and walk it in silence out of respect for the ocean that may return at noon? And when it returns, do they float the same path on rafts stitched from reeds and sealed with resin, as if the road simply changed its element? A second image gathers inland, where the earth opens not to swallow but to offer. In a rift valley, lake after lake chains the floor, blue beads in a long, patient scar. Hot springs ring their shores with white where minerals crystallize in the night air. Humans come to these places not only for water, but for warmth and work. They soften root and bone in the steadiness of heat. They cure resin by steam. They bake thin clay bowls in pits lined with stones that remember the spring's touch. Around them, basalt columns rise like organ pipes. Each fracture sings its own scale when struck. The valley becomes a workshop for sound and stone as much as for hunger. Grounding returns near the center of a continent. Where the western interior seaway presses and retreats, shorebirds carry news between far ends of a drowned plain. Fish run where a forest stood. The wind molds dunes where shallow. Waves once read themselves to sleep. Fossils in our time, marine shells nested inside sand that also carries footprints of land animals, prove such rooms of mixed memory existed. The people of that age do not need proof. They live the mixtures. Camps move with the line where salt thins to sweet, where reeds take hold, where fresh water feels the pull of a tide the eye can scarcely see. Speculation leans toward culture. Do calendars there count not only moons but shoreline positions? A notch for the season when the reed island nearly touches the lime bluff, another for when it wanders. Do songs memorize safe harbors in an order that follows the sky's slow swing, each verse anchored in a star that rises just so above a basalt fin? When the ground speaks too loudly, a fissure opening under fern, a hillside easing down in wet weather, do stories gather around the safest stones, teaching names for ridges that have never failed? A small, precise image holds a flat pebble, scratched with thin grooves, each groove crossing two others at angles learned from the sky. It is not quite a compass rose, not quite a calendar, and yet it keeps direction and season together in the palm. Beside it, a longer stone bears a line of shallow cups pecked into its face. At dawn, a pole casts a shadow that fins across those hollows in a measured swim. When the shadow meets a certain cup, it is time to pull the rafts higher. The instrument is not carried. It is visited. The place and the tool are the same. Another grounding whisper. Islands invite difference. In our world, island biogeography trains species to grow small or large, bold or shy, to fill niches that continents leave crowded. If humans scatter along newborn chains of land, their languages, tools, and rituals may diverge like finches, knots unique to one archipelago, smoke recipes tuned to the resin of one wind-stunted grove, lullabies matching the wing beats of particular night flyers. When sea paths reopen, exchanges feel like the return of long-separated seasons. Objects cross the water, a shell mask, a polished bone needle, a story, and find new homes. The invitation returns with salt on it. Imagine a night crossing, the sky black enough to be warm, the sea smooth as a sleeping animal. Rafts whisper, where their lashings sip and release, sip and release. Ahead, a low shoulder of rock keeps its own small weather, a halo of spray that flashes star-spark where waves touch. The navigator lifts a hand. He is not counting. He is remembering. The raft bears more than bodies. It carries gardens lashed against the deck, pots of seedlings bound for a new sand, embers banked in clay, a piece of yesterday's shore learning the taste of tomorrow's wind. And the question lingers, wide, as the Tethys at noon. If minds and maps grow in a world whose boundaries move, does philosophy learn to love the provisional? Do ethics form around leaving room for return? For coastlines to advance back into the camp without finding harm? For a path to be a thread rather than a scar? Does the sense of home shift from a point to a pattern, from a place to a practice, that survives migrations and earthquakes and the long, slow swing of continents? The ground quiets. The sea resumes its measured breathing. On the headland of cooled rope lava, the last warmth lifts into the night. In the morning, the horizon will be the same and also slightly not. A bead moved by a hand too slow to see. The people will rise and step into that thin difference with the calm of those who have learned the earth's other language. Not permanence, but drift. Not certainty, but rhythm. Not walls, but ways. Some mornings begin like any other. A fog that lifts from the river as if the water breathes. Dew strung along spider silk like stars folded down to ground. Wing shadows crossing fronds with the same unhurried law that has held since before memory. Then a second sun arrives, low and wrong, bright beyond brightness, dragging a white tail that writes across the sky. The forest pauses. Birds close their throats. Even the insects forget their threads. In the breath between noticing and understanding, day changes its meaning. A grounding detail steadies the imagining. Geologists find a thin band of clay around the world that carries too much iridium, a metal common in asteroids but rare in Earth's crust. In that band lie spherules of once molten rock, shocked quartz, soot and ash, the signature of a great impact. The crater waits half-buried at the edge of the Yucatan, more than 180 kilometers wide, its walls slumped, its floor rebounded. The date settles near 66 million years ago. In the record that follows, many voices fall silent at once. Before silence, there is fire. A poetic image sweeps the horizon. The sky glows not only above but all around, as if air itself burns. Ejecta returns as rain made of glass. Needles of conifer ignite. Resin runs, bright as tears, then flashes to smoke. Wind moves like a hand across tall ferns and lays them down in flames that travel faster than feet. On coasts, water draws away as if inhaled by the planet. Fish lie twisting on wet sand under a white noon. Then the sea returns, wearing mountain shoulders, folding shore into itself with a roar that seems to come from under the ribs. Speculation moves with care through this brightness. Do humans, small and practiced at thresholds, read a first faint red in the morning and carry embers to stone? Do they seek the old overhangs where smoke stains climb and the floor rises just enough to deny the river's tongue? Do rafts lash tighter? Do reed gardens gather into a single flotilla? The sky writes urgency. The ground answers with paths known by hand and knee. In a world long trained by predator, the posture of readiness is already rehearsed. The body moves before the mind finishes the sentence. Then the bright passes and something heavier arrives. Fine ash veils the sun. Days dim toward an unseasonable dusk. A grounding thread returns. Models and rocks agree that soot and aerosols lift into the stratosphere and stay, throwing a shade on Earth that cools the surface and withers the light plants need. Photosynthesis slows. Food webs lean, then lean further. Wildfires give way to cold, and cold is followed by acids falling from gray air. Weeks blur into months. The far ocean forgets its color. The night sky loses its sharpness, becomes a scattered milk. A small, stubborn image holds. Under a rock ledge where the rain does not reach, a coal glows the size of a grape in a shallow bowl of clay. Above it, a thin stick steams. Around it, 3 hands cup and breathe. Resin darkens and then sets. Fibers dry to rope. The coal is not a solution, it is a memory of warmth arranged against a wind that grows more certain each day. In the gloom, fish bones gleam on stone. A cord of shells lands against a palm and counts without numbers. One night, another. Invitation arrives, quiet as ash. Imagine standing at the mouth of a cave while noon wears a color like evening. Snow that is not snow sifts down, soft and stinging on the tongue. The forest speaks only in cracks and small collapses. A branch resigned to wait, a trunk giving its long-held water to the air. Far off, the sea tastes the moon and steps out of rhythm for a while. You step back into stone. Your eyes become a kind of ember that remembers the shape of the world when light was easy. Breath ghosts in the cool air. Behind you, small faces watch your face to learn what to feel. How does hunger arrange itself now? Shellfish keep their calm under the lid of tide. Roots do not need much light to bide their time. Mushrooms find their hour in the compost of a burned world. In warm valleys, hot springs gather a kind of soft life around their edges, steam feeding green in patches when the rest of the map goes gray. Perhaps humans move toward these places as moths move toward a window in winter. Perhaps they bring gardens lashed to rafts into coves that never freeze. Perhaps they learn the taste of lichens and the patience of soaking bitter breads longer than any story ever asked for. Another grounding whisper complicates the sky. At roughly the same time, far away, great provinces of lava pour in pulses. The Deccan traps building layers of rock as if the earth turns pages of fire by the mile. Gases rise, climates swing. Whether the lava writes preface or epilogue is not for this quiet to decide. It is enough that the air carries new moods and the sea new terms. To the small fires under stone, the origin matters less than the fact that cold and dimness are now a chapter that the body must read without skipping. A poetic image of memory takes shape in the dim, on a cave wall already carrying hands, and claws and stars of dots, a new shape appears. A circle crossed by slanting lines like rain, a low arc beneath marked with short vertical strokes like teeth of a tide, an open palm beside it, fingers splayed. No one writes, the day the sky fell, yet the wall remembers. Each mark carries a smell of ash and a fingerprint shining briefly before drying to matte. Questions arrive like slow comets, gathering no imperative. Do some humans survive the first years by living as they have learned? In margins, in movable camps, in places where stone shelters and water speaks. Do children grow up with dim memories of the bright and a clear book of the gray, and make a culture that keeps ember as law and harvest the tides of mushrooms as calendar? Or does the long night press too much weight on a slender net of knowledge, and the thread breaks in places no eyes can find in time? If they survive, do they survive as one lineage among many survivors? Crocodilians with their ancient patience, birds with their light bone and thick songs, mammals that know dusk by heart? Another invitation opens, a kind that does not require an answer. Imagine a river years after. The banks wear a fresher green. The canopy is not yet cathedral. Light reaches old stone more frankly than before. A child, any child of any time, wades in warmed shallows and turns a pebble with a toe. The pebble gleams with a glassy bead sealed in it long ago. He pockets it for its smoothness. At night, by careful fire, he rubs it with thumb, and the bead remembers the day the air caught fire. He does not know that. He only knows it is good. To touch. The earth stores some memories and erases others. A civilization of resin and cord and clay bowls, of knots that kept coasts in the palm and songs that kept stars in the mouth, leaves little more than silted villages and smoke on stone. The thin iridium band holds no braid of human hair, no ash of woven mats. If they persist, their trace is mostly their descendants with stories they cannot date precisely. Stories that make a cosmology of caution. The sky is not the ceiling. It is a door that can open the wrong way. One last question hangs like a pale disk behind cloud. If this people endures the long dim and walks into a newer light while the last of the giants fade, do they become the ancestors of us or of a different us, one taught for millions of years by predators and ash to speak softly, to carry embers, to measure triumph in the number of species that also eat? The forest does not answer. It takes the weather it is given and makes leaves. The ocean smooths its own breath. Stone cools. On certain nights a streak crosses the sky and then is gone. In the caves the handprints remain, small and open, as if asking the night to pass through them gently. Some mornings begin like any other. A fog that lifts from the river as if the water breathes, dew strung along spider silk like stars folded. Down to ground, wing shadows crossing fronds with the same unhurried law that has held since before memory. Then a second sun arrives, low and wrong, bright beyond brightness, dragging a white tail that writes across the sky. The forest pauses. Birds close their throats. Even the insects forget their threads. In the breath between noticing and understanding, day changes its meaning. A grounding detail steadies the imagining. Geologists find a thin band of clay around the world that carries too much iridium, a metal common in asteroids but rare in Earth's crust. In that band lie spherules of once molten rock, shocked quartz, soot, and ash, the signature of a great impact. The crater waits half-buried at the edge of the Yucatan, more than 180 kilometers wide, its walls slumped, its floor rebounded. The date settles near 66 million years ago. In the record that follows, many voices fall silent at once. Before silence, there is fire. A poetic image sweeps the horizon. The sky glows not only above, but all around, as if air itself burns. Ejecta returns as rain made of glass. Needles of conifer ignite. Resin runs, bright as tears, then flashes to smoke. Wind moves like a hand across tall ferns and lays them down in flames that travel faster than feet. On coasts, water draws away as if inhaled by the planet. Fish lie twisting on wet sand under a white noon. Then the sea returns wearing mountain shoulders, folding shore into itself with a roar that seems to come from under the ribs. Speculation moves with care through this brightness. Do humans, small and practiced at thresholds, read a first faint red in the morning and carry embers to stone? Do they seek the old overhangs where smoke stains climb and the floor rises just enough to deny the river's tongue? Do rafts lash tighter? Do reed gardens gather into a single flotilla? The sky writes urgency. The ground answers with paths known by hand and knee. In a world long trained by predator, the posture of readiness is already rehearsed. The body moves before the mind finishes the sentence. Then the bright passes and something heavier arrives. Fine ash veils the sun. Days dim toward an unseasonable dusk. A grounding thread returns. Models and rocks agree that soot and aerosols lift into the stratosphere and stay, throwing a shade on Earth that cools the surface and withers the light plants need. Photosynthesis slows. Food webs lean, then lean further. Wildfires give way to cold, and cold is followed by acids falling from gray air. Weeks blur into months. The far ocean forgets its color. The night sky loses its sharpness, becomes a scattered milk. A small, stubborn image holds. Under a rock ledge where the rain does not reach, a coal glows the size of a grape in a shallow bowl of clay. Above it, a thin stick steams. Around it, 3 hands cup and breathe. Resin darkens and then sets. Fibers dry to rope. The coal is not a solution, it is a memory of warmth arranged against a wind that grows more certain each day. In the gloom, fish bones gleam on stone. A cord of shells lands against a palm and counts without numbers. One night, another. Invitation arrives, quiet as ash. Imagine standing at the mouth of a cave while noon wears a color like evening. Snow that is not snow sifts down, soft and stinging on the tongue. The forest speaks only in cracks and small collapses. A branch resigned to wait, a trunk giving its long-held water to the air. Far off, the sea tastes the moon and steps out of rhythm for a while. You step back into stone. Your eyes become a kind of ember that remembers the shape of the world when light was easy. Breath ghosts in the cool air. Behind you, small faces watch your face to learn what to feel. How does hunger arrange itself now? Shellfish keep their calm under the lid of tide. Roots do not need much light to bide their time. Mushrooms find their hour in the compost of a burned world. In warm valleys, hot springs gather a kind of soft life around their edges, steam feeding green in patches when the rest of the map goes gray. Perhaps humans move toward these places as moths move toward a window in winter. Perhaps they bring gardens lashed to rafts into coves that never freeze. Perhaps they learn the taste of lichens and the patience of soaking bitter breads longer than any story ever asked for. Another grounding whisper complicates the sky. At roughly the same time, far away, great provinces of lava pour in pulses. The Deccan traps building layers of rock as if the earth turns pages of fire by the mile. Gases rise, climates swing. Whether the lava writes preface or epilogue is not for this quiet to decide. It is enough that the air carries new moods and the sea new terms. To the small fires under stone, the origin matters less than the fact that cold and dimness are now a chapter that the body must read without skipping. A poetic image of memory takes shape in the dim, on a cave wall already carrying hands. And claws and stars of dots, a new shape appears. A circle crossed by slanting lines like rain, a low arc beneath marked with short vertical strokes like teeth of a tide, an open palm beside it, fingers splayed. No one writes the day the sky fell, yet the wall remembers. Each mark carries a smell of ash and a fingerprint shining briefly before drying to matte. Questions arrive like slow comets, gathering no imperative. Do some humans survive the first years by living as they have learned? In margins, in movable camps, in places where stone shelters and water speaks? Do children grow up with dim memories of the bright and a clear book of the gray, and make a culture that keeps ember as law and harvests the tides of mushrooms as calendar? Or does the long night press too much weight on a slender net of knowledge, and the thread breaks in places no eyes can find in time? If they survive, do they survive as one lineage among many survivors? Crocodilians with their ancient patience, birds with their light bone and thick songs, mammals that know dusk by. Heart? Another invitation opens, a kind that does not require an answer. Imagine a river years after. The banks wear a fresher green. The canopy is not yet cathedral. Light reaches old stone more frankly than before. A child, any child of any time, wades in warmed shallows and turns a pebble with a toe. The pebble gleams with a glassy bead sealed in it long ago. He pockets it for its smoothness. At night, by careful fire, he rubs it with thumb, and the bead remembers the day the air caught fire. He does not know that. He only knows it is good to touch. The earth stores some memories and erases others. A civilization of resin and cord and clay bowls, of knots that kept coasts in the palm and songs that kept stars in the mouth, leaves little more than silted villages and smoke on stone. The thin iridium band holds no braid of human hair, no ash of woven mats. If they persist, their trace is mostly their descendants with stories they cannot date precisely, stories that make a cosmology of caution. The sky is not the ceiling. It is a door that can open the wrong way. One last question hangs like a pale disk behind cloud. If this people endures the long dim and walks into a newer light while the last of the giants fade, do they become the ancestors of us, or of a different us? One taught for millions of years by predators and ash to speak softly, to carry embers, to measure triumph in the number of species that also eat? The forest does not answer. It takes the weather it is given and makes leaves. The ocean smooths its own breath. Stone cools. On certain nights, a streak crosses the sky and then is gone. In the caves, the handprints remain, small and open, as if asking the night to pass through them gently. After the bright and the dim, after ash and quiet, the world inhales again. Shoots lift through soot. Rivers remember their paths. In the hush that follows ordeal, hands return to making, not as conquest, but as a continuation, a long thread of small agreements with matter. If humans endure beside the last late-echoing giants, what technologies breathe here, centuries folded into centuries, under a sky that still carries the rumor of falling light? A grounding detail comes like a seed in the palm. Long before furnaces, people of our own later past shape iron from the sky, meteoritic iron, rich with nickel, lifted from desert and plain, hammered cold into beads and blades. Tutankhamun's dagger glints with such metal. The phrase iron from heaven carries history. If fallen stones can become edge and ornament, then humans under a Mesozoic night can also learn that a certain weight in the dust answers the hammer with a different voice. Heaven gives a material. Hands give it memory. They do not begin with anvils. They begin with rhythm. The forest remains damp, the winds uncertain, predators abundant. The technologies that thrive are quiet alignments, composites of sinew and resin, laminations of wood and shell, mats woven tight as river skin. Leverage arrives before clangor. A pole and a fulcrum lift a water basket from a muddy bank. A line over a high branch pairs human weight with a stone's patience to hoist. A raft frame into better shade. A log that rolls on round cobbles shows how to move homes without leaving scars. A poetic image leans low over a tidal flat at dusk. Stones set in a crescent comb the falling water. Between their teeth, fish linger as if undecided. From the shore, a net of reeds slides forward, almost soundless, its knots remembering fingers that tied them months ago by torchless light. The trap is not a battle. It is a conversation with the tide. When the moon lifts, the weir looks like a constellation laid on sand. A map the sea itself reads. Where wood meets cord, projectiles begin to dream. A throwing stick lengthens into a levered spear thrower, the arm extended by wood's memory of tree, the dart set with a microlith edge that is more idea than object. Many small stones arranged to act in chorus. Sling cords whir where voice does not dare. Nets bloom like night. Flowers and close like cautious mouths. These are ancient in our own record. In this one, they find their shapes early, not to conquer a world of herds, but to carve a narrow corridor of enough through a world of teeth. Grounded again in chemistry, the hearth becomes a workshop for adhesives and smoke. Resins learn to cure, in layers. Ash joins them, lending hardness. Powdered shell enters as temper. A pot fired low and long in a ring of banked coals survives a river crossing, then another. A clay ball hollow as a bird's bone, vented with a pinhole, placed near the edge of a fire, trembles and sings. A lid of thin sherd on a simmering vessel rattles and leaps with playful steam. In play, a principle arrives. Heat makes air push. Water turns to breath. No bronze whistles, yet the first whistles blow. Cut from hollow stems, they wander like low stars over reed beds. Speculation moves gently, like a hand along a bark wall. Do these people, watching stems, pulse, and lids, dance, make a toy that spins when steam escapes through bent reeds, a simple aeolipile of clay that grows no larger because noise invites wings? Do they learn bellows not as leather bags but as lung-like baskets, ribbed with flexible sticks and skinned with leaf that swells and falls, breathing embers brighter without flame leaping high? The forest accepts quiet apparatus. It refuses spectacle. Technology here learns shyness as a form of wisdom. The sky adds its lessons. Pterosaurs ride invisible ladders, their wings reading thermals the way fingers read knots. Children tether leaf-framed kites on long cords of twisted fiber, not for play alone, but to learn the moods of wind above the canopy. A high kite's tug tells whether a crossing will be kind. A thin, rattling shell fixed to the line becomes a voice for gusts too faint for cheeks to feel. Later, raft sails borrow weave from nets and curve from wings, sealed with a wash of resin and smoke so they do not drink rain. Counting follows cordage. Notches on bone tally seasons, knots on lines keep maps coiled and portable. A way of remembering grows that does not need open flame or loud gathering. A quipu of the Mesozoic, perhaps, where thickness, twist, and spacing mean cove or reef. Fresh spring or bitter pool. A safe bend where a river hesitates or a bank where crocodilians sleep. The mathematic begins as a textile. Base 5 in one village, base 4 by the sea where tides teach quartering, and arithmetic braided, rather than written, flexible, reweavable when shorelines drift. A quiet invitation opens like a reed flower. Imagine sitting where river meets lagoon. In your hands, a cord runs, knot by knot, a memory of coast carried without weight. Each knot touches the pad of your thumb, and along your palm the map unrolls. A sandbar that walks a little each year, a limestone fin that cuts swells into stripes, a fresh seep near a tree younger than its shadow. Above, the sky goes pale. You close your eyes and the cord shows you the way as surely as stars. Materials widen. A tree fallen and buried in mud becomes stone that remembers wood. Petrifaction in this warm world is not miracle, but patience. A shard of such stone is heavy and faithful. A plank of it becomes the cool base for grinding, unwearied by years. Lightning stitches glass through beach sand. Fragile tubes lie just under the surface after a storm. Held to the ember's glow, they reveal a river of light frozen mid-run. Someone strings a handful with cord. Wind passes, and the fulgurites sing with a dry, high voice. Sound becomes instrument more than warning. Bone flutes whisper, shell. Rattles count. Drum logs speak across groves through root and ground. Grounding returns to metal without furnace. A child finds a pitted, dark stone that seems too heavy for its size. On striking, it sprinkles sparks like a tiny meteor shower. The elders hammer a sliver free, work it cold on a flat rock until it takes a dull, unyielding shine. It will not bend kindly. It will not suffer carelessness. But if trimmed and bound to a haft with resin and sinew, it cuts with a gravity no stone blade can match. Later, the same hands notice red earths near hot springs and green ones near dripping caves. They collect them for color and for curiosity. When a hearth runs hotter than usual, some clay bowls bloom blue-green at their lips. Someone touches, someone remembers. Smelting does not arrive, a seed of it sits, waiting for a future that may, or may not seem like ours. A poetic image settles in a sheltered cove at noon. Rafts rock lightly, their decks planted with gardens in shallow trays. A low fence of woven reeds hems an infant fire, its smoke threaded through a clay hood that carries heat into a drying rack rather than into the canopy. Above, shells hang on cords, flashing heliograph messages in sunlight. 3 slow glints. For safe, a quick scatter for caution. The cove is nearly invisible from the river. From within it, the river is a moving mirror that tells more than it shows. Questions arrive without urgency, like tide through mangroves. If science grows from observation in a world that punishes noise, does experimentation prefer miniature? Are engines toys, kilns small, vessels narrow, the scale of everything tuned to hide and endure? Does mathematics live longer in cords than in stone because cords can travel when coastlines do not? If meteoric iron becomes holy edge and story metal, does metallurgy wait in the wings for ages? Or does the long practice of gentle heat lead, by degrees, to a kiln that wakes ore to liquid and changes the quiet forever? Another invitation, softer. Still, imagine holding a bead of sky iron between finger and thumb. Cool, faintly grained like the memory of a storm. You pass it to another hand without sound. In return, you take a cord. Feel a knot that means fresh water at a certain bend, a place where stars, when clear, seem to lean a little lower. Overhead, a kite circles, speaking in small tugs of what the higher wind intends. Around you, gardens lift their leaf palms to light, and the ocean speaks to the lagoon with its endless, even breath. In such an alternate survival, technology remains more verb than noun. It mends, binds, lifts, dries, listens. It builds not towers but tendencies, to move quietly, to store light as ember, to make maps that flex, to prefer many small strengths to one noisy one. Perhaps, given ages enough and risk eased by time, furnaces glow, perhaps wheels roll under baskets, perhaps the quiet multiplies into a city of woven shade and stone that does not ask the sky to notice it. Or perhaps the ethic that kept them alive, the art of remaining almost unseen, persists as law. And the question lingers like a calm horizon after storm. If intelligence awakens early and endures among giants, does it learn to shape a civilization? That leaves more songs than scars, More gardens than walls? Does it arrive, millions of years before ours, at a science of gentleness, a way of power that keeps the sky, the stone, the ocean, and the silence as partners rather than proofs? The river answers by turning. The wind answers by moving from one grove to the next. The ember answers by lasting the night. Hands continue their small revolutions. Above them, day sails on, bright and unastonished. Under cooled rope lava and along the ribs of old mountains the earth hides a darker shine, stones that stain fingers red, stones that pull a needle's point, stones that glitter blue-green in the shade of a spring. They wait where water loosens soil and where heat once ran through rock. After ember, cord, and resin learn their quiet grammar, hands begin to ask a harder question. Can the earth's bones be persuaded to give up a metal flame? A grounding detail steadies the wondering. In our later history, people first shape native, copper by hammering, then much later coax metal from ores by raising charcoal heat inside clay. Iron, more stubborn, yields in a bloomery as a spongy bloom, beaten hot to drive out slag. Bog iron accretes anew in marshes where iron-rich water meets air. Hematite serves long as pigment before edge. A poetic image gathers near a hill, that smokes in winter. Fumaroles stitch steam through grasses. Pools ring themselves with orange where minerals settle like fallen dawn. In a shallow cave cut by an old lava tube, a low clay furnace holds charcoal. Two reed and leaf bellows breathe. Through clay nozzles, ribs flexing like the gills of a huge fish. The pit glows pomegranate red. Within, small nodules the river surrendered after flood sit among coals that whisper. Speculation moves carefully. In a wet world of wings and teeth, can fire for metal learn to hide? Chimneys run sideways into thicket so leaves write smoke into air. Kilns crouch under overhangs, camouflaged with bark and fern, mouths turned toward rock rather than sky. Bellows keep a low rhythm that mimics insect song. If heat is life and noise is danger, metallurgy learns stealth. Small charges, short burns, many places. Another grounding thread returns the metal to the map. Iron is plentiful yet locked, copper rarer but visible, its malachite and azurite blooming, turquoise in seeps. Ores roast to drive off breath, then meet charcoal's gift. Stone becomes metal by exchange. The chemistry is simple, the practice is patient. A quiet invitation opens in the half-dark. Imagine kneeling beside the little furnace, the clay warm against your shins. Ash paints the air sweet and mineral. Between pulls of the paired bellows, you listen for the sign that heat is rising. A faint hiss in the throat, a brightness. You feel on your teeth more than you see with your eyes. When the charge is done, a bloom lifts with forked wood to a flat stone. Another hand waits with a hammer of river-rounded rock. Poetry returns with a different shine. Children play a game with a black pebble that tugs a thorn afloat on a still bowl. The thorn leans, returns, leans again, always toward the same invisible suggestion. Lodestone teaches direction before anyone names it. Night crossings learn to. Trust the tug when clouds erase stars and wing shadows patrol the moon. Grounding touches older alchemies. Hematite grinds to a red that rain cannot steal. Yellow earth roasted to red proves heat can change a stone's nature. Green crusts near springs, boiled with sour fruit vinegar, leave copper's taste on the tongue. A bitterness later ages make. Medicine. By accident, a fleck of slag cools to a bead of dark glass. Strung on cord, it glints with captured dusk. Curiosity, not conquest, keeps the coals alive. Speculation walks the edge of a larger door. If bloom follows bloom, will hammers and anvils grow from convenience into craft? Will bars and rings appear, stored labor made portable weight? If copper flows from small clay stacks into open molds, will it become fish hooks that keep their bite in salt water, or bells whose soft speech measures wind? Does meteoric iron stay sacred edge, sky metal for gifts and graves, while earth iron serves daily hands? Invitation returns as feel more than picture. Hold a bloom wrapped in wet leaves. Hear it sigh as water flashes and metal settles into itself. Lay it on stone and strike. Each blow is a word the bar understands. Outside, a crocodilian turns in the river with a sound like someone shifting a log. You pause until the water is a sentence again. Then the hammer continues. Work and world keep each other company. Another grounding note faces fuel. Metal hungers for heat. Heat devours wood. In a forest where trunks are pillars of sky, cutting openly invites teeth and collapse. Charcoal must come from branches, deadfall. Coppiced shoots near water where regrowth is quick. Pits smolder under clay on sandbars. Flood carries ash away and leaves a clean slate. Forestry, before it is a word, becomes a rhythm. Take little, take often, plant soon, plant near. Poetry bows to the sea again. Along brackish edges, bog iron knits beneath reed mats. Orange jelly turning each season to ochre nodules raked. In baskets without mining a hill. This is a kind metal, renewed by water and time. People learn which inlets grow it faster, which wines bring the taste of iron to the lip. They carry ore upriver in boats already heavy with gardens, and return with edges that cut wet fiber clean. Questions settle like slag in a crucible. If metallurgy grows in whispers, dispersed, renewable, defended by quiet, does an age of industry arrive early or arrive differently? Not with towers and smoke, but with many small furnaces that respect hiding places. Not with rails and clamor, but with boats and cords and bells that ring like rain. Does the compass appear not as empire's arrow, but as a bowl that teaches patience when the sky is closed? Night leans in. In the lava tube workshop, the last charge cools. A thin plume of warmth rides the floor to the cave's mouth and disappears into fern. Tools settle on their stone like sleeping animals. A lodestone rests beside a cord, knotted, with distances. The bloom waits for morning, when edges will be born one careful breath at a time, and the question lingers, heavy and bright as iron in tongs. If humans coax metal from the Mesozoic earth, do they learn dominance or keep allegiance to the scale that saved them, shaping an art of metals that is more listening than conquest, more ember than blaze? Outside, the forest resumes its endless sentence. The river turns over once in its sleep. Above the hill, the stars keep their cold appointments. Inside, the small furnace remembers each hand that taught it to breathe. Two skulls sit in the mind's hands. One belongs to the world we know. The forehead eased and high, jaw lighter than the old apes, teeth trimmed to fit a diet widened by fire and patience. The other belongs to the world of giants. Not a fossil we have, but a possibility we consider. In this second skull, the eye orbits deepen as if to drink more dusk. The brow grows like a ledge to shade glare and channel sweat. The ear bones perhaps thicken a little to hold newer sensitivities. Between these two imagined domes, the breath slows. Evolution is not a wand. It is a long river of small edits. Under wings and teeth, what edits would the river prefer? A grounding detail leans against the thought. Bodies change with climate and pressure. In our own record, colder places encourage stockier forms with shorter limbs, Bergman's and Allen's rules, while hotter regions favor taller, slimmer frames that shed heat. Neanderthals carry robust chests and limbs, a shape that keeps warmth. Equatorial peoples stretch elegance into air that demands cooling. Persistence hunters among later humans trade fur for sweat glands and long tendons that recycle motion. Form follows weather, work, and time. Here the Mesozoic presses different hands upon the clay. The air is warm and often wet, the forests are close, the predators are large and many. A poetic image gathers at a river's bend. A person stands, hip deep, still as a reed, a bundle of nets across one shoulder. Their torso is narrow but strong, the muscle not layered thick but braided long. The calves show ropey tendons above feet that grip silt like hands. The face is turned to water, but the ears tilt fractionally toward the forest behind, a posture that is not fear so much as habit. Speculation opens gently. Would humans here grow taller, to see above ferns and gain early warning, or shorter, to move beneath the leaf line and waste less sound? Perhaps height diverges by place. River people long and reed-like, canopy people compact climbers with strong forearms and a barefoot confidence on wet bark. Would shoulder blades ride wider, a frame tuned for climbing and quiet vaults across? Fallen trunks. Would the pelvis learn a compromise that still loves walking but forgives crouch and spring? Another grounding thread turns to senses. Many large creatures speak in low notes. Crocodilians call with sounds that tremble water and ground. Humans hear poorly below 20 cycles of air per second, but the body feels infrasound as pressure, and bone carries it. In some mammals, the bulla, the bony capsule around the middle ear, grows to honor quiet frequencies. Might our alternate skull thicken its cups a little, tune the drum to catch the footfall 2 breaths earlier? In the head's deep hallway, the semicircular canals help track motion. Across species, their proportions often match agility. Life in branches and over slippery roots could tug those curves toward more sensitive arcs. Eyes ask for their own edits. Night and edge hours hold safety. Retinae that lean more toward rods than cones make sense for dusk. Pupils that widen easily help when storm dark falls at noon. Most primates lack a reflective eye shine. The tapetum lucidum serves cats and deer, not us. Could such a mirror evolve in our lineage under a long twilight? Perhaps not. Perhaps yes. Evolution is a history of it depends. But even without mirror eyes, lids could carry heavier pigment to shield glare. Brows could grow to cast deeper shade. The muscles that adjust lens and iris might favor endurance. Slow, steady seeing over sudden dazzle. The invitation comes soft as leaf shadow. Picture 2 faces in profile, both human. One is familiar, a head you might pass on a city street at dusk. The other is kin, yet altered by a million evenings beneath wing and fern. The differences are not monstrous, they are modest. A brow heavy enough to keep rain from the eyes, ears more being than ornament. Jaw a little deeper to pay for muscles that clamp husk and shell without help from an easy fire. You do not fear this stranger. You recognize a cousin who learned the forest more intimately than you did. Grounding returns to feet and hands, the oldest tools. Our foot's arch stores energy. Our Achilles tendon returns it. Our toes shortened, to favor a rolling stride. In a slick world, toes might reclaim length for grip, the big toe not deviating back toward a branch-hugging thumb, but growing stronger, more articulate, a partner in quiet balance. The hand, already a miracle, might broaden a little. Pads thick with a leather earned by wet rope and reed cord, nail beds darker under a sun that insists. Wrists whose bones in our world juggle throw, haft, and thread might lean harder into rotation for climbing and silent descent. What of skin? Heat and humidity teach different lessons than cold wind. Eccrine sweat already grants humans a strange advantage. Here it remains scripture, but the reading changes. In high parasite pressure, skin hardens its first lines of defense. Sebum chemistry bends, Immune systems diversify their keys. Melanin deepens, a quiet shadow against a hard sun, and not only on faces, backs and shoulders grow used to sky. Hair stays short where sweat must fly, but along forearms and the nape a soft thatch remains, not to warm, but to soften touch. A breeze becomes warning. A memory becomes gooseflesh. A poetic image settles on a fallen conifer-turned bridge. A small group crosses single file. Each step a choreography learned from childhood. Toes first, heel kissing wood, only when balance agrees. Arms low, not out, so silhouettes remain narrow against the sky. Heads inclined, eyes scanning not the drop, but the leaves that might betray company. Halfway, they pause without signal. A shared stillness that feels like listening with bone. Below, water speaks softly over stone. Above, a slow shadow turns and continues, indifferent. The crossing resumes, footsteps writing a sentence only. The bridge reads. Speculation enters the skull's interior rooms. The amygdala, old sentinel of urgency, has worked for ages already. In this world, it does not shrink. But living long under pressure often trains the prefrontal rooms to calm the alarm with steadier plans. Perhaps selection favors nervous systems that recover quickly rather than those that never kindle. The cortisol spike falls off sooner. The hand steadies the ember while the mind waits for the night heron's second call. Intelligence bends toward anticipation, but from that stance grows something like patience, even grace. Another grounding detail floats up from islands and caves. When space and predators pinch or ease, bodies answer with sighs. Dwarf elephants. On Mediterranean islands, giant rats in Pacific caves. Scale is negotiable. On floodplain archipelagos, one sees both outcomes. Small river people who move where reeds forgive only lightness. Heavier upland cousins whose frames cancel tremor in their own bones. No one shape wins everywhere. A grammar of bodies develops, dialect by dialect, each consonant a tendon, each vowel a rib. Invitation returns with the intimacy of touch. Imagine your own jaw in this world, setting quietly after a strip of tough pith, teeth fitting leaf and sinew more often than soft mash. Enamel wears differently, not ruined, just signed. Tongue learns flavors that are also warnings. Saliva changes its work with bitter roots. Starches leached to kindness. Cheek muscles grow a patience you can feel as a posture, an unhurried hold on effort. Your neck knows the weight of watching. And the skull. The second skull in your hands warms, as you consider it. The face remains open. The vault remains large. There is still room for stories, for chords that map coasts, for the slow mathematics of star and tide. But certain ridges speak of a different apprenticeship, a mastoid process that loves strong necks, a zygomatic arch that forgives many hours of quiet chewing, sinuses that learn a humid world's moods, nasal turbinates tuned to warm, damp air and read it. Nothing here is supernatural. It is simply the body answering the forest's long, low question with form. Questions stand up like reeds in morning, innumerable and uninsistent. Does this human run far or climb better? Does the eye trade a little color for a little night? Does the ear embrace lower notes at the cost of the highest insect whispers? Does the brow write storm and sun into bone, a permanent visor against a world that peers back? And most quietly, would this body, tuned so carefully to survive, hold room for art as ours does, for caves of spirals, for kites that learn wind, for metal coaxed without boast from earth? The ocean answers with its breathing. The stone keeps its cool counsel. The sky rolls the same river of stars across both skulls. In the silence between their breaths, the two possibilities do not argue. They sit side by side as kin. The hand closes around them gently, sets them down, and listens for the forest's next suggestion. Stone keeps its promises. It stands where hands place it, listens longer than wood, speaks in light instead of voice. Sky, too, keeps a kind of promise. The sun returns to its gates. The moon rehearses its pale circuits. The river of stars flows with a patience that seems older than the forest. Between stone and sky a language begins, quiet as breath, exact as shadow. A grounding detail steadies the imagining. In our own later world, many early places of gathering, stone rings, and walls, doorways in caves, corridors of rock, align with the sun's two turnings, the solstices, or with the balanced days of equinox. Light finds a slit, a chamber, a mark, only on certain mornings and evenings, writing a calendar not with numbers, but with illumination. A simple upright, a gnomon, will measure the day in shadow and the year by the length of that shadow. At noon. Stone needs no ink. The sky brings the pen. A poetic image gathers on a ridge above a lagoon. Here, uprights of river-brought boulders rise from soil dark with ash and fern root. They are not tall. They do not challenge wing or fang. Their ambition is smaller and therefore more enduring. At dawn, a band of light walks between two stones and rests on a third. In the hush, a few figures watch with the same attention they give to a sleeping child. The beam brightens, touches a shallow groove pecked into the face of the marker, and holds for a little while as if listening. Then it moves on. The watchers breathe out, not applause but agreement. The world has said a word they understand. Speculation arrives like the slow pulse of warm air. Do humans in this age, pressed to be cautious, build observatories that never announce themselves? Low stones tucked inside grass, sightlines that vanish when you step aside, hollows in caves that bloom with light only when the year asks a specific question? Does the sky become a teacher of when to set rafts free, when to lift seed from leaching pouches, when to follow fish into channels, and when to wait for mushrooms after rain? If the forest demands soft voices, perhaps a science of shadows appears, patient and public only to those who have learned where to stand. An invitation opens, gentle as dawn through cloud. Imagine kneeling at the back of a shallow chamber under a hill of old lava. The smoke-stained ceiling remembers many winters. On one wall, a thin white stripe of shell powder runs from floor to shoulder height, a path traced years ago by steady hands. Today, the room is dim. Your eyes accept that dimness. Then, as morning grows outside, a blade of light threads the entrance and sweeps the wall slowly. It finds the shell stripe, climbs it, then pauses where the line doubles, marking a node that occurs only at this season. You feel the pause in your chest as if you too have stopped. Time is not a hunter. Time is a shape you can touch. Another grounding thread returns, this time from rock itself. Desert varnish, a thin glaze of manganese and iron, grows on. Exposed stone at the pace of patience, microns in 1,000 years, sealing pecked marks with a dark signature of age. Magnetic minerals cool in lava and keep the direction of Earth's field like iron filings frozen mid-turn. Stone carries clocks that do not tick audibly, but still insist. In this imagining, people do not read those clocks as future science will, yet they feel the difference between a fresh bite in rock and a mark worn soft by many rains. They choose places where stone will keep their lines and dots from dissolving, knowing that memory sometimes needs mineral bodies. The language itself grows by convergence. On coastal flats, chords not distances to reefs and coves. In stone rings, shadows quote the sun. On cave walls, small dotted clusters mirror the grain of familiar constellations. Not perfect maps, but kinships. The Pleiades as a scatter of finger presses above a painted reed bed, the long ribbon of the Milky Way as a sweep of ash smudged by palm, the moon's cycle kept as a row of 30 shallow dimples the thumb, can count without looking. Elsewhere and later, other humans do the same. Here, they do it sooner, because night is a refuge that asks to be read. A quiet image settles beside the sea. At low tide, humans set 2 stones far apart on a sandbar, each with a notch cut into its upper face. When the bright wanderer, we will one day call Venus, stands between them just before dawn. A whistle of hollow stem sounds once from the shore. The sound is not celebration. It is notice. The winds that favor a crossing often arrive with this bright companion. In the mind, a table grows, not of numbers but of relationships. This sky, this wind, this moon, this tide, this hall of light. In the cave, this mushroom flush on the old log. Speculation walks a little farther. Do such tables and alignments become philosophy as much as tool? If the world can be read without wounding it, does a way of thinking arise that prefers correspondence to extraction, pattern to seizure? Do myths grow that teach children to find knowledge in the fits between things? How a stone and a star agree, how a leaf's tilt repeats a sail's, how a shadow's retreat measures not loss but the promise of return. Perhaps the people here come to believe that truth is not loud but precise, and that precision can be humble. An invitation leans close as a whisper. Picture your hand pecking a small groove into river-bitten basalt with a harder stone. Each tap speaks in a bright, high syllable that the forest soon absorbs. You're not drawing an animal today. You are drawing an angle. Months from now, if you stand on a particular pebble in the doorway, light will touch that angle and the rock will say, "Now," in a language even claws must respect. You rinse the dust with a little water. The groove darkens. It looks like nothing to anyone who does not know. It looks like a door to you. Grounding returns to the slow sky. The sun keeps a year. The moon keeps a month. The planet lights keep their own tempers. Over centuries, constellations shift their seats by a hair. The long procession of the Earth's axis tilts star and season against each other in a cycle too wide for a single lifetime. In our world, this 26,000-year sway becomes knowledge late. Here, where the culture watches quietly for millions of seasons, precession might be sensed as a rumor first, then a certainty. The star that anchored a ceremony does not return to its notch. The beam in the cave arrives one day later than a grandmother's story promised. Do they move the notch? Do they move the story? Or do they make a new notch and hold both truths as neighbors? A poetic scene opens near a lodestone on a woven tray. A thorn floats on still water in a shallow bowl. It nods toward a place between 2 stone uprights where the ocean always looks a little darker. The bowl has its own ceremony, set inside. The shade, never under open sky where wings can read it, kept for clouded nights when stars hide behind wet air. Compass and calendar, cord and cave. Each answers a different mood of the same question. How shall we move without being lost? How shall we stay without being surprised? Questions rise like swallows and fall like them, effortlessly. Does writing follow such instruments? Or is writing considered too loud for this world, replaced by durable patterns everywhere? Knots for direction, pecked angles for days, pigments for taste and season, notched shells for debts and shares. Do numbers remain felt more than seen, counted on beads that pass from palm to palm at a council, never left on a wall where anyone might misread them? If empire is the habit of permanence, does a science built on moving light choose instead the habit of return? The invitation returns once more as night lifts. Imagine a circle of stones no higher than a knee, lost to view until you stand within. A child brings a bowl of embers under a cowl of clay. Adults shield the glow with bodies so it will not climb into the canopy. The eastern notch pales. Birds begin, then stop, then begin again. The sun steps into the notch, a coin on a string of ridgelines. It stares through an aperture and finds the shell stripe inside the cave and paints it with certainty. You feel your own breath synchronize. A year in this quiet world is a thing you can stand inside. Stone keeps its promises. Sky repeats with enough change to keep minds awake. Between them, language grows that does not require sound. A grammar of beams, a lexicon of grooves, a literature of knots and alignments. It is not less human for being gentle. It is simply fitted to a place where listening is safety, where excess attention is an offering and an art. And the question lingers like a fine shadow at noon. If thinking starts here, with stone taught to speak by light, with sky invited to write on walls, does philosophy of this people come to believe that truth is that which returns, and goodness is the care that allows it to return unharmed? The lagoon exhales once. The stones cool by degrees. The beam withdraws. The chamber dims. The cave remembers. Outside, leaves turn their flat faces to the late sun, and far above a wing crosses the bright and leaves it unbruised. Night deepens, and with it comes the long work of dreams. The body sleeps, but the mind rehearses. It weaves fragments of the day into tapestries of shadow and firelight, of teeth glimpsed in foliage, of embers coaxed into flame, of rivers that both feed and threaten. In these half-real theaters, humanity practices survival before the trial returns with morning. A grounding detail. Modern neuroscience suggests that dreams help consolidate memory and simulate possible futures. REM sleep, with its rapid eye movements and vivid narratives, allows the brain to rehearse threats, solve problems, and refine skills. Studies show that even in waking life, our minds often anticipate danger by imagining scenarios in advance. In this Mesozoic imagining, surrounded by predators and storms, dreams may serve not as escape, but as rehearsal, a secret classroom of the night. A poetic image rises. In a cave warmed by embers, sleepers shift on mats of fern and reed. Their breath mingles, slow and communal, echoing faintly in the stone chamber. Behind their eyelids, visions unfold, a raptor moving too quickly, a river swelling too high, a spark refusing to catch. Hands twitch as though weaving nets, feet flex as though climbing. The fire glows low, but in the world of dreams, 1,000 rehearsals run silently, teaching without words. Speculation drifts gently. Could dreams in such a world be shared? Not in the literal sense, but in the way that similar dangers shape similar visions. If many dream of wings crossing the moon or of water receding too far, would those patterns be told aloud upon waking, shaping stories and warnings? Perhaps the earliest myths are born not of waking observation, but of dreams collected at dawn. The forest teaching through imagination what it cannot teach safely in the flesh. The invitation is soft. Imagine waking just as the first light touches the cave's mouth. Around you, others stir, their faces shadowed with the residue of dreams. A hand rises, tracing a claw in the air. Another shakes the head, whispering a low sound of river. No one claims certainty, but together they listen. The day's choices lean toward the dreams, not because they are true, but because they are possible. You feel yourself carry fragments of your own dream. A bird's cry, a flash of water, into the day's decisions, as though sleep itself has joined the council. Another grounding thread. Anthropologists note that many cultures, even in our own time, place importance on dreams as sources of wisdom. Among hunter-gatherer societies, dreams often guide hunts, migrations, and rituals. If the dangers of the Mesozoic sharpen the mind's nightly rehearsals, then dreams may take on even greater authority, woven into daily survival. A poetic closing image. Night thickens outside. The forest breathes with slow roars and distant calls. Inside the cave, the embers glow red, dim but steady, like hearts at rest. Above them, the sky rolls with stars, silent, patient, eternal. Between earth and sky, between waking and sleep, humans drift through visions both fearful and wondrous, carrying fragments of the infinite into the fragile span of their days. And the question lingers like smoke curling toward the ceiling. In a world so perilous, would humanity trust dreams as much as daylight? Would the border between vision and memory blur until both became part of the same survival, the same story? The cave does not answer. It only holds the sleepers in silence while the forest waits for dawn. Morning comes pale, filtered through mist that clings to the canopy. The forest exhales the damp of night, and every leaf gleams as though it has been polished by silence. Humans step quietly from their shelters, stretching limbs that remember dreams. The fire has dwindled to a low sigh of ash and coal, but that small glow is enough. It is gathered, coaxed, renewed, just as it has been every day, for as long as memory holds, a grounding detail. Even in our own history, the continuity of fire mattered as much as its making. Many cultures carried embers between camps, preserved in bark or clay, because to lose fire meant more than cold. It meant vulnerability, hunger, delay. In this Mesozoic imagining, the ember becomes more than tool. It becomes the thread of continuity, a fragile sun carried in the hands of humanity through a world of scales and shadows. A poetic image gathers. On a ridge above a river, figures sit quietly, their faces turned toward the horizon. The sun is rising. Not rushed, not fierce, but with the slow dignity of return. For a moment, the warmth touches their brows, their cheeks, their open hands. They do not worship, not in the sense of sacrifice or submission. They only witness. And in that witnessing, they find rhythm. Fire in the hearth below, fire in the sky above, fire in the veins of stone that still remember their own molten youth. Speculation drifts like smoke. What if all of human thought in this timeline or in ours is less about invention than about tending? Not conquest, but continuity. Not the building of empires, but the careful carrying of small vital lights through darkness and upheaval. Would humanity, shaped by giants and shadows, come to see its role not as master of the earth, but as guardian of small fires, small gardens, small stories that survive where strength alone would fail? The invitation opens. Imagine yourself there, on that ridge. You feel the first heat of morning across your face. You hold an ember in a clay bowl, the coal glowing softly against ash. Around you, the forest stirs, indifferent but vast. In your chest, something whispers, "This is enough." You do not need to dominate the world. You only need to continue within it, to carry the light forward one more day. A closing image leans into stillness. Above the ridge, the sky spreads wide, pale blue, deepening to the endless. The ember glows, the river runs, the forest remembers. The people breathe together, small but steady, fragile but enduring. And the question lingers, if survival itself is an art, is that not already a kind of triumph? The day softens into evening. Once more, shadows lengthen across the forest floor, stretched thin by a sun that lowers itself with unhurried grace. The river turns to bronze, its surface carrying the sky's fading fire into the distance. Above the canopy, the first stars return, unchanged as they have always been, as they will always be. The huts are quiet. Smoke drifts in thin ribbons, dissolving before it can rise high. Inside, breath slows, the rhythm of many bodies folding into one shared silence. Outside, the giants still move, wings crossing the last light, tails brushing ferns. But their presence feels distant now, softened by the calm that follows a long day. The ember glows low, patient and red, not hurried toward flame, but content to last. It rests within ash like a small heart, steady, unafraid of the dark. Beside it, tools lie in gentle order. Flakes of stone, lengths of cord, shells strung for memory. None of them speak, yet each one carries its quiet promise of tomorrow. The forest leans inward. Leaves whisper with night air. Frogs begin their slow, pulsing chorus. Insects embroider the silence with fine threads of sound. The world has not grown safer, but it has grown familiar, and familiarity itself is a kind of refuge. You imagine yourself lying back on woven reeds, your body sinking into their forgiving strength. The ceiling of leaves above you opens in places, showing fragments of sky. Through one gap, you trace the slow rise of a star, then another. They belong to you only because you notice them, and noticing feels like enough. Breath by breath, the boundary between thought and dream thins. The ember dims further, the world grows softer. The river, the forest, the sky, and your own heartbeat fall into one rhythm, slow, tidal, endless. There is no conclusion, only continuation, a gentle flow into sleep. The questions remain, as they always should, patient and unanswered, waiting for tomorrow. Sleep well.